Hello everyone, welcome to What If Quirkless Deku got mentored by Almight and made Harem with Momo, Melissa and Todoroki Part 7. Before we start, please go support Oscar Xperia 5991 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Deku is a male. Chapter 27 Because You Are, Part. The battle was over. The loud cry of master and student resounded in the ears of all who witnessed such a fight, the demonstration of that great feat only those two were able to achieve the long-awaited victory. Everyone saw it, everyone felt it, the excitement, the euphoria, the joy, the fear, the confusion. Izuku Midoriya. A new stage in his adventure had begun. I really win. One of the wounded heroes whispered, the memory of the maddened bull's death howl still wandering through his memories. His blood stained much of the area, even if his body had mostly turned to ashes, parts of his flesh decorated the place, impregnating the environment with the smell of burning flesh. Izuku walked on the pool of blood while staggering. When he looked around, everyone noticed that the place he was going was towards the location of All Might and All for One. A hint of fear was born in their hearts, to win against such a huge enemy. To have such power that would overwhelm anyone, to show such determination that only ridicules their own by having him by their side. There were so many emotions generated, but the one that predominated was undoubtedly shame. The cloak he was wearing fluttered in the wind of the new dawn, reflecting a living legend. Even if it means killing others? It was the phrase that he remembered during his journey about to reach his destination. It was not said by any carrier, nor by that presence shrouded in shadows. No, that phrase was thought by himself. Izuku, I have hurt many people, not only by my actions, but also by my attitude. The image of teachers and friends appear in his mind, my former companions. Turned into those nomas, being a few steps from arriving. If I had not fought with all my strength, he would have won. The face of the Minotaur appeared in his thoughts. If I had not finished him off definitively, I would have only caused more death. Nothing would have stopped him, being just 3 steps from arriving. I don't regret anything. Even if it means abandoning others? Yeah. The memory of his former high school classmates, he was not to blame for his tragic fate. Even if it means hurting others? Yeah. By killing those once human creatures, the young man was sure that their families would suffer, the pain of seeing what they became and how they ended their lives. The pain would not make them understand that they were saved from living in such a cruel way. Their teachers, no matter what they say, there was no excuse for the actions they committed during a simple exam with children in their first year. Finally, it had arrived. Izuku, I staring at them. Even if it means killing others? The winged Nomu who tried to kidnap him after being badly injured in his fight against Stain. When with his sole order one of those Nomas was torn to pieces by his peers for hurting his friends in the camp, those who a few minutes ago were killed by his own hands. When the muscular body was nothing but ashes. That last question that he had not dared to ask before, now had no doubt, no remorse. Yeah, was his answer. Izuku had learned a hard lesson about being a hero. Izuku, I staring at them, I'm here. Both grandfather and grandson had met again. AFO, Izuku, is that you? Slightly raising his arm in the air, I can't sense you right now, I'm not using any quirk for that. His tone was soft, his smile contrasting with his melancholic tone. Please come a little closer. I want to give you something. Izuku's eyes widened, knowing what he meant. Izuku, give me something? The young man took a step forward, getting a little closer to the big villain. AFO. No, that wouldn't be the correct term. Cough, cough, coughing with great pain. I want to give you something back, something that is yours by right. Izuku, you mean? Taking a step forward while clenching his fists. AFO, yes, his arm began to shake. He had no strength to keep it extended. Give you back your own. All for one. A strong heartbeat hit Izuku's chest. After that, a second beat, followed by a third with the same intensity. Without realizing, he had taken another step forward. Without either of the two men and the young man noticing, the microphone that one of the deceased heroes was still carrying continued to transmit his words, combined with the fact that the cameras were still broadcasting the events, made the world pay attention to the event. City Center. Inko, whispering while continuing to look at the screen. Izuku. Clasping her hands together, the woman was about to speak in a louder tone. She wanted to show her support, celebrate his great victory, make people celebrate it too, remind them of the feeling that until now she has always conveyed in her victories. Don't let him get it. But it was too late for the loving mother. One of the civilians in the crowd raised his voice, transmitting that feeling of rejection to the others. That cursed power should not be owned by any villain. Who assures us that he doesn't use it just like his damn grandfather? Voices rose, uniting against the young man, fear of the unknown once again reigning in people's hearts. Social media also exploded with comments. No matter the language or the nation they came from, the vast majority were of absolute rejection. Knowing the existence of such an abominable power was too much for them. They were already afraid of the strength that Izuku had just demonstrated, a power so absurdly strong that he was able to defeat that monster that not even Almight himself could defeat. Let the Hero Commission deal with that Quirk aberration. If you really want to show that you're not like your grandfather, then give him all your quirks. The memory of Izuku floating, emanating black whips, stopping in mid-air, ignoring one of the laws of physics, knowing where he would receive attacks. A single quirk was incapable of so many diverse abilities. They could only speculate on what they had seen, arriving at half-truths. The cries of rejection increased, demanding the heroes in the area to stop them, begging All Might, who was at their side, to stop them, to rise once more and do his job as their symbol of peace. Inko, shut up. Unable to resist it any longer, the loving mother tried to scream for them to stop. Unfortunately, before that happened, a pair of hands covered her mouth and held her left arm very tightly, causing her pain. Inko Midoriya, you will come with us. A man whispered in her ear at the same time that the grip of his hands increased, leaving marks on her skin due to the great force he exerted on her. Inko, resisting as light tears began to spill. She tried to stretch her free arm towards the nearest person, trying to make as much noise as possible to get anyone's attention. She was asking for help. Please, I ask you not to resist. Do not make it more difficult for yourself or for your son. Two more men appeared in front of her and grabbed her free arm. In doing so, they grabbed it with the same force as they began to drag her. No one noticed. They were more busy watching and yelling at the screen. The last thing Inko saw was the big screen that continued to broadcast Izuku's actions and words. Place of battle. AFO, Argonaut, his heart ached just by saying that name. Will you continue using that name even knowing that nothing in that story was real? The young man remained silent. It lasted a brief moment. He didn't need to think much about it, but for the others it seemed like an eternity. Izuku, yes, I will continue to wear it with pride because... One last memory crossed All for One's mind, a moment before his long journey to hell began. Crying again, brother? The youngest brother was sitting in the living room of his house, with his little pet sleeping next to him. He was holding the book that his parents gave him, smiling a big smile, while he couldn't help but shed tears. I can't help it, this hero's story is amazing. You are very sentimental as always. The older brother sat next to him, gently stroking his pet who only stretched when he was petted, and while the boy looked at his little cat he continued talking to his younger brother. I still don't understand why you cry so much if you know that nothing in that story really happened. I know, but I still can't help it because... Izuku's words were the same ones he said so many years ago, dealing another hard blow to the villain's heart. Izuku, what I felt when I read it was real. A heart-wrenching laugh erupted from his throat, painful to hear. All Might remained silent, not only because of the severity of his bleeding wounds, but because he was once again seeing his hated enemy display such a vulnerable, melancholic, regretful side, such a human side. Izuku, why now? Clenching his fists, why are you doing this? All for One's hand dropped a few inches, but by sheer force of will he raised it again. AFO, to protect you. AFO, unlike you, I will rest while you continue that lonely path of the hero. Izuku swallowed some saliva at his words. You will save them even against their will, and you will stain your hands with blood for their sake, even if they do not thank you. Slowly Izuku's hand approached his grandfather's, as he continued talking. AFO, if one day they come to consider you an enemy of the world, a monster. I want to be there to support you, although I doubt that will happen. His hand began to lower. But this time it would not rise again. That is why I want you to be able to defend yourself, although I hope that day never comes. Their hands, just a few centimeters away from touching. He didn't understand. Something inside him wanted it to happen, to be whole again. His birth gift was calling him and his body was reacting. They both wanted to be together again. Izuku Midoriya, stop right now. Get away from that villain immediately. A few heroes with the strength to even shout raised their voices in the form of orders to the young man. In his ears was a communicator, giving them direct orders from the director of the Hero Commission. This is a direct order from the Hero Commission. If you really want to be a hero, you must obey them as the highest authority in this profession. At those last words, Izuku's hand stopped, just a centimeter away from his destination. Not knowing what to do, his breathing quickened, his heart rate increased. Almight, this is also a direct order for you. Stop it, don't let them touch each other under any circumstances. Izuku looked at his teacher, confused about what decision to make. As a big fan of heroes, Izuku fully knew that the Hero Commission was the one who set the rules in the profession. Everyone, regardless of which academy they graduated from, whether in this country or abroad, had to abide by their rules. Disobeying them carried sanctions which could even lead to revoking the hero licenses themselves. If they do not have them, any actions they do using the quirks will be considered illegal, and they will be pursued by the authorities. Izuku, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? All might. Izuku spitting blood while holding his open wounds. Why you must. Oh what? What should I do right now? His master's words never left his lips. His wounds had already caused a lot of damage. His grandfather's arm was just a few centimeters away from giving way, and to make matters worse, he himself was already beginning to feel the pain of his own wounds. The broken bones and torn muscles from unleashing such enormous power caused him a lot of internal damage. The whole world was looking at him, rejecting his own existence. Who should he listen to? Who should he obey? He was confused. The voices of the heroes, the words of his grandfather, the uncertainty of his teacher's words. What will others say? What would his companions think if he acquired such power? What would those girls think? Does it even matter? AFO Izuku. He wanted to scream, he wanted to cry, but he couldn't. He shouldn't waste time on those useless actions. He had to make a decision that resembled a curse. No matter what he chose, he would gain something, but at the same time he would also lose something. From a distance, his friends watched the situation with great concern. Kirishima, what do we do? Kaminari, we must. Leaving Bakugo's body on the ground, the intern advanced, but Gran Torino prevented him by extending his arm. Gran Torino, not necessary. His gaze reflected great seriousness, but at the same time a slight smile formed on his lips. Gran Torino, I believe in. The image of Nana came to his mind. The ideal of the hero that they both longed for so long, coming to think that they had found it with all might, but now. Gran Torino, that stupid brat will ever achieve that ideal. I believe that this boy would go further than anyone, much further than even All Might himself. Izuku, aye. His hand retreated as more heroes, under direct orders from the commission, followed, shouting at him to get away, not to touch him. The mass screams of civilians watching the big screens, the comments on social media saturating the page with the same intensity of the screams. Everyone wanted to exert their own will on Izuku. And it was there, at the moment of greatest uncertainty, just seconds before all for one's hand fell and with it his conscience. The voice of the first bearer appeared again in his mind. Yoichi, don't leave your decisions to other people, don't let anyone guide your will. The world is distorted, many around the world regretted it. Manipulating people with invisible strings from above. Whispers from behind the scenes that a tragedy play disguised as comedy. Yoichi, whether it's the professional, heroes, your teachers, your friends, or ourselves. Like writing a drama story. People were unwittingly guided by the will of those in power. Yoichi, don't listen to them, don't listen to my brother, don't listen to the eighth, don't listen to us either, just listen to yourself. People are not simple puppets moved at will. Some in the world had given up. Yoichi, decide and do what you want by your own will, not by orders from others. After all, this is your own story, Izuku. The first one's voice faded away. All for One's arm began to fall without any signs of stopping. Izuku's heart beat loudly. His withdrawn hand quickly stretched out again. The last words of the first would be heard. Yoichi, you are the only one who decides how your adventure will be. Because you are. With a kind tone, the first one withdrew, thinking about that hero, that he, his brother, and so much wanted to arrive, although it was still too early to talk about that. Izuku, taking his grandfather's hand just at the last moment, I want him back. Ignoring the screams around him, those red rays surrounded Izuku's hand. He didn't feel like something was being taken from him. It was quite the opposite. Two quirks that should never have existed, two quirks that remained in an infinite conflict whose fight should have been endless, or so it should have been. But now things had changed, for the first time since its beginnings, the one for all and the all for one. They were united in the same carrier. That all for one was free of sin. The only time it was used there was no malice, only the infinite innocence of an infant. There was no intention to harm anyone. What he stole by accident was quickly restored by his grandfather. AFO, thank you, and? It was all he could say before he lost consciousness, a big smile forming on his lips, but this time, it was genuine. A great weight had been lifted from his tired shoulders. Izuku, this feels so, looking at his hand in which a small, but visible red ray had been created, nostalgic. A loud bang had resounded at his side. Turning his face, the young man opened his eyes in surprise, bathed in a touch of fear. Izuku, All Might! His great hero had fallen face down on the ground due to the severity of his injuries. Izuku quickly ran to his side, holding him in his arms while the master's blood stained his student's hands. His muscles disappeared again. His hero's suit turned into nothing more than shreds from the arduous battle fluttered lightly in the wind. Izuku, in his desperation upon seeing all that blood, finished tearing his suit and tied it over his master's body, who upon seeing his face could only smile. Tashinori, so you accepted it. Izuku, don't say anything. Tightens the strips of clothing over his wounds. You can scold me later for taking it, but now. Tashinori, no, I won't. His eyelids felt heavy, his consciousness fading. It's not the quirk, but the person. Izuku opened his eyes. They were very similar words to those that Star told him the day they met. There's something very special about you, cough cough, spitting blood. There always has been. Even before giving you one for all with the little strength he had left, the hero brought his hand to the heart of his precious student, and having all for one won't change it. Smiling calmly, I trust in you, cough. I know that one day you will be able to reach that ideal. By this point the great hero couldn't hear anything. He just watched as Izuku's tears fell on his chest, as he raised his face and apparently asked for help from the paramedics who had just arrived on the battlefield. Tashinori, you're crying again. That's okay, cry all you want. After a defeat, victory awaits you. The phrase that I told him that day when I saved him in his own school came to his mind. Izuku, you have the strength of your greatness, but you have to take the helm and follow your own course. Follow it, no matter how much it hurts. His hand fell suddenly. With pure force of will, Tashinori remained conscious, staring at his successor, remembering their entire history together, how it was only a matter of a few months before he saw him no longer just as his successor but as the son he never had. Tashinori, I haven't forgotten the promise I made, the promise to live on, to watch you fulfill your dreams. When that time comes and you become a man, I hope to be there, receiving some of the light you emit that day. An illusion, caused by the great loss of blood, had reached the mind of the great hero just seconds before losing consciousness, the image of Izuku, rising much further than he ever dreamed of reaching. He handed over the baton, as if it were a miracle. Tashinori raised his arm, pointing at Izuku's illusion, and with his last strength said, Tashinori, now it's your turn. Become the greatest hero as you already are for me. I know you will achieve it. Because you are. Before finishing his sentence, All Might had lost consciousness. His arm suddenly fell. Izuku screamed. However, his voice did not reach him. The paramedics were running to his location. The large puddle with the peace symbol's blood was spreading all over the place. All his wounds had opened. And while that was happening, something was happening in the hero's mind. It could have been part of his illusion, a delirium due to the loss of blood, or perhaps a miracle. Izuku, who still held his master tightly, from his own wounds small drops of blood fell on his body, with no intention of passing the one for all, but perhaps that was more than enough to create a connection. Tashinori, huh? Slowly opens his eyes. This is strange, I don't feel any pain anymore. Before he could say a single word, he heard a voice, a warm and gentle voice that he had not heard in a long time and that he missed. Nana, hey, Tashinori. Tashinori, that voice. Opening his eyes wide in surprise, his body rose a few inches. He wanted to confirm the origin of those words. Tashinori, teacher? Unable to contain himself, a few tears began to roll down his cheeks. How? Touching his chest with some fear, did I? Nana, Tashinori, taking his student out of his thoughts, come here. Following his request, the old and wounded hero stood up once more. As he approached, his wounds healed, his muscles regained their volume, his appearance returned to how it had looked in his golden age. After many decades, both were together again face to face. Tashinori, teacher, where are we? What happened to Izuku? What will happen to? Many questions and worries were still on his mind, but that no longer mattered in this place. Nana, hey, interrupting him while giving him a thumbs up, you did a great job. Smiling sweetly, I'm so proud of you. The intensity of his tears increased. Those words spoken by the woman he considered a second mother were of enormous value to him. Tashinori, I did it? Nana just nodded. Behind her a kind of wind was forming, warm, conveying a cozy heat, resembling the calmest days of summer. The hero could distinguish 6 shadows behind his teacher. The bearers were welcoming him. Nana, you can finally rest. Slowly he stretched out his hands, but before he could take a single step he heard Izuku's voice. Wake up. You have to wake up, stay with me. You promised. At the sound of his voice, Tashinori lowered his hands and stared at Nana, who just smiled, knowing that he wasn't ready for this yet. Tashinori, teacher, I wiping away tears. Nana, I know now. She was the one who approached her student and delicately took him by the hand. This decision is only yours, Tashinori. You can accompany me and rest, or you can choose to return. Separating his hands and taking a few steps back. Nana, no option is wrong, but the decision should be yours alone. Izuku's words continued to echo in the place. At that, Tashinori just turned his back on his teacher and the bearers. He couldn't see them, but they smiled as they already knew the answer from the beginning. Tashinori, I still can't be by your side moving forward, but in the opposite direction to Nana, in the direction of his student's voice. I want to see it with my own eyes. I want to see the future that Izuku and the new generation of heroes will be able to achieve. The decision was made, the promise made will be kept. He will remain by her side. He had no intention of leaving her until he sees his dreams come true. The ideal, the longing, for which he bet so much, would one day cover the world. Izuku, who was still holding his master in his arms, calmed down when he saw that his chest was showing signs of breathing again. That last scare made his time end. As he relaxed, his consciousness finally gave way, fainting between the hero and the villain. Thus the battle was concluded. The paramedics had finally arrived, as well as more of their reinforcements to attend to the wounded, some more urgently than others. While they took away Almight, Endeavor, Mirko, Hawks, the other high-ranking heroes in the top, and of course Izuku. A thought crossed the minds of people across the country. They had been left without their greatest pillar. The others were badly injured, and the great pillar they should have had in the future was in question. Uwabami, under there! Pointing at some rubble, 2 people trapped. Looking for more trapped people. There are almost no civilians affected. Is this a stroke of luck, or maybe? Various heroes had arrived to help with the search for trapped people, but were surprised to find that there were far fewer of them than they thought. Tiger, I'll take care of it. Taking out 2 unconscious people, Ryuko, Tomoko, thinking about his 2 companions. You guys are really amazing. Even though your quirks were stolen, you forced me to come help the civilians. I respect you guys a lot more. Most people would be devastated by such a loss. wanting their closest friends to be by their side in such difficult times, but they didn't. Even though Tiger offered to stay by their side, they almost dragged him out of his room, but they made him come to help. Being left alone, they both looked at each other and shed a few more tears. Both had one thing on their minds, seeing the great feat that Izuku did on television. They wanted to see him and talk to him about something important. Reporter: the heroes along with the firefighters are still searching for trapped people, but the estimated number is much lower than everyone thought looking at the rescuers despite the huge battle that this place witnessed. The number of civilian victims is really low, making the camera point at the whole panorama. This is without a doubt a miracle. Cameraman, signaling him to look to the side. Reporter: the leader of the villains, opening eyes in surprise. I is currently being placed in a cage under the direct supervision of the Hero Commission, trembling a little. For security reasons we will remain here. We don't want him to steal our quirks. Speculation had begun. Rumors increased exponentially on social media, talking about what that cursed power, all for one, could really do, that those who wield it are monsters. Many comments also included Izuku. Tartarus maximum security prison, 1 day later. AFO, what is this place? Due to the severity of his actions and the enormous danger he represents for society, drastic measures had been taken. A special cell awaited him. Guard, shut up. Carrying AFO in a wheelchair, completely tied up. Can't you tell just by looking? A proud smile formed on his lips. Oh, that's right, you don't have eyes, ha ha ha. AFO, I understand. Staying calm. Not only will I not receive a trial, but judging by the speed with which they brought me, my cell was already ready before. His words upset the guard, who had been discovered without being told a single word on the subject. Guard, this is a place for those criminals whose death sentence is not enough. Trying to scare him. You don't know what awaits you in this place, you. AFO, there are many censors around here. Guard, what are you saying? Bastard. A chill ran down the guard's spine, AFO's smile slowly beginning to form, making his companions pale in comparison. Guard, you shouldn't see anything. A cold sweat ran down his forehead, as the great villain continued speaking. AFO, aside from the rustling of clothes and small vibrations in the air, I've spent the last few years using an infrared ray quirk to vaguely sense my surroundings. His tone was calm, but it was beginning to give the guard even more chills, who stopped in his tracks, watching the back of the prisoner. AFO, using sounds and vibrations to sense movements, this way of sensing has kept me sane and helped my spatial perception, and yet pausing for a moment, wanting to say something, but leaving it for another time. With the sensors everywhere in this place, I can't feel what's going on around me. His smile softened. I apologize for distracting you from your work. Being in a place like this brought back some memories to my mind. You can keep taking me to my cell now, haha. The creaking of the wheelchair began to be heard again. In a slow manner both continued to enter the long corridors. Guard, and no way I fight Almight in a condition like that. Being a few meters from his respective cell, all for one smiled a little more when he felt that they were passing through a special cell, and it was a woman who perhaps one day could be useful for his plans. AFO, I admit it, I lost our Almight fight, but that's nothing compared to what I gained by returning my grandson's original quirk. All this time it's been a painful fight, but you made a mistake. You involved him. Being left in his cell, just listening as various weapons were pointed directly at him, yet he never stopped smiling. AFO, Almight, you miss your moment to die. A martyr has more influence on society than a fallen symbol. Being the master means making your student able to stand on their own. With the master he depends on, gone to a place he can't reach. This will fan the flames of hatred in him. He will step forward to take the lead. He has allies surrounding him, and he is learning how to do more for them. The image of his student appeared in his mind. AFO, everything will be okay. Tamura Shigaraki, the experience, the hate, the regret. Let all that make you stronger. You will pave the way for when my true successor takes control. Now the image of Izuku appeared in his mind. Izuku, enjoy the good times you have left to the fullest. You will experience and see for yourself how rotten this world is when those people don't get what they want from you, but I know you'll be okay. Because you are. On this very day, society had entered a state of chaos. There were various reports. People read newspapers while going to work or school by train. Heroes Commission. The gnomes we capture are the same as those that lived before. They have no human responses, and we don't seem to be able to acquire any new information from them. Those still alive don't react in the slightest. What should we do with them? Some of them were identified by their relatives and demanded the delivery of their bodies. Sitting at a large table, the top brass of the Hero Commission and some politicians were gathered in an extraordinary meeting, discussing how they should proceed from this point. They had a lot to talk about. We will not hand over the bodies of those gnomes. A voice echoed in the middle of the room, located at the head of the table. Everyone else fell silent at her words. The general manager had begun to speak. Cremate some unclaimed bodies from the morgue and tell them that those ashes are those of their children. Then they will stop bothering them, taking away value from what were once the lives of some young people. Their bodies are an invaluable source of knowledge. The villains are getting stronger, and we must balance the scales. Interlacing his hands, various plans occurred to him that he would soon begin to carry out. Although we captured their leader, the subject known as Tamura Shigaraki, and the rest of the group managed to escape, despite all this we could say that the result was a draw. Idiot, we lost our symbol of peace, and what's even worse, now there is a second. All for one. That is in the hands of the damned grandson of that villain. We lost a lot of direct agents. Most of the top heroes will be out of action for a while they recover from their injuries. Every time the league fails they get stronger, and now we have to deal with that kid. Not forgetting that we must deal with the issue of having started the attack without evacuating the population. So many topics to discuss, most of them had headaches. But the general manager didn't. She simply turned her chair to see the beautiful scenery she saw through the window. With a calm tone she spoke. I have been in contact with the director of the UA, and he must be organizing a press conference right now. That rat thinks he's much smarter than us. I know, but it's better to keep him close, because if he wants to be smart with us later, we'll show him why it's us humans and not dirty animals like him who rule the world. News conference. They've arrived. The hours continued to pass. At noon, multiple reporters from almost all the news channels were in a great state waiting for the press conference to begin. It was not long before Director Nezu along with some executives of the Hero Commission stood in front of everyone. What will happen to Japan from now on? In an aggressive manner, the conference began, at which point Nezu raised one of his paws, and bringing the microphone close to his mouth, he began to speak. Nezu, good afternoon to everyone present. First of all, I thank you for coming to this place so quickly pretending kindness. I am aware that you must have many questions, and we will answer them all. Director Nezu! A young reporter interrupts him. According to some testimonies from several heroes and members of the police, they never received the order to evacuate the civilians. What can you tell us about this? A tiny tick appeared on the director's face, but his facade remained completely firm. Nezu, we are aware of that issue. Interlacing his paws, we opened an investigation, and as a result we managed to capture the culprit. It was a villain associated with the leader of the League of Villains. With his quirk he managed to manipulate our communications and make both teams not know about the civilians in the area. Before she could ask another question, the director looked at the young and energetic journalist. His gaze was kind, too kind, so much so that for a second she had a bad feeling. Nezu, before asking your questions I ask that you first give the floor to us. Taking a sip of water from a glass beside him, we don't plan on hiding any information. That's why to begin I'd like to talk about two specific quirks. A small laugh formed on his lips. We'll talk about the quirk known as All for One. A slight pause filled the stadium. For a second there was only silence. Nezu, everyone already knows what that quirk is capable of doing, and of the two people who currently possess it a new plan would begin, but that is not the only unique quirk that exists. Almight possessed it for almost his entire life until a year ago he inherited it to a child whose name everyone knows. That quirk is known as One for All, and its current wielder is Izuku Midoriya. And so, without hiding any detail, Director Nezu revealed to the world the truth of those two powers so similar and different at the same time. This was certainly not the director's original plan, but these do not always turn out as one expects. That is why he adapted to these new circumstances. The indignation was visible again on social media. How can they give so much power to a simple child? It was the most repeated theme. After finishing telling everyone the truth, the directors of the Heroes Commission announced the different heroes who, due to their injuries, would have to be absent from their duties for a long period of time. Touching on the subject of the Ida family, which was cleared of all accusations because the person who had made such accusations without any proof was clearly linked to the leader of the villains, saying that more than ever they need all the heroes available and assuring that this family has been very noble members of society, with a long history of service to the community. What about the best son? The young reporter spoke again. His behavior was not very noble when he attacked from behind at the UA Sports Festival when he had been defeated. That young woman was not very convinced by the words of the director or the members of the committee. Her intuition told her that they were only telling half the truth, that they were still hiding many things. Commission member, Tenya is still very young and was still in the adrenaline of the moment, playing it down. Besides, I guess I won't have to remind him who he fought against during that period you're talking about. He fell silent. The look on the commission member's face and the people around him told him everything. With time and the excellent teaching from the UA, he will improve his abilities and decision-making so as not to be so impulsive. How true is it that he was attacked by a third grader while he was injured in the hospital? Now another reporter more in line with the commission's way of thinking, and Nezu took the floor. Nezu, unfortunately it is true, the student Nijire Hago and member of the Big Three attacked Tenya Ida while he was recovering in the hospital, faking anger, as if she cared, and not only him, but also a professional hero who was passing by the area and wanted to avoid a fight between the young people, slightly lowering his head. Such behavior will be duly sanctioned. Not only will his title as a member of the Big Three be taken away, but his provisional license will be temporarily withdrawn until further notice. Lie after lie, the real reason for such punishment was due to the influence of the Ida family, which would not tolerate such an attack, determined to continue tormenting the curious young girl. After all, after the great injuries of his older brother, Tenya was now next in line to be the next leader of the family. Hospital. Sir Almight. Standing by his side next to the stretcher where his idol remained unconscious while dozens of sensors monitored his vital signs. Sir, why? How did things end up like this? He was devastated. The future he saw for his great friend continued to torment him. You will die in the worst possible way. Those were almost his words the last time they saw each other. While he still didn't know what to do, he saw the press conference on television. Once again they were touching on the subject of Izuku. Sir, maybe I'm wrong about him? Searching for meaning, he left the room and walked towards the young man. Maybe something had changed. He wished no, he needed something to change. If All Might trusted that young man so much, it must have been for a reason. Even with his eyes, he must not have seen something. The words of confidence that All Might said about Izuku were running through his mind in an endless cycle. Upon reaching the room, he came across 2 security guards guarding the entrance. He only had to show his ID to be allowed through. Sir, what makes you so special? In front of Izuku, who was also still unconscious, I find it hard to believe in you, but if All Might is willing to do so much, maybe I'll just take one last look. Activating his quirk on Izuku once again, he genuinely wished that something had changed, that they were not prey to such a tragic future, that there was still hope. Yes, he wanted something to change. He didn't do it. On the contrary, things got worse. A desolate landscape was all that was around him. Everything had been completely erased. A strong pressure hit his chest as if he had received a hammer blow on it. The air was suffocating. His body began to tremble when he recognized the small ruin. It was. Before he could say anything, a gigantic hole opened in the middle of the earth, so deep, so dark. In the middle of that deep darkness, an endless number of bright red eyes stood out, and finally came out. Hundreds or even thousands of monsters came to the surface, different sizes. Some were colossal in size, some crawled on the ground, some flew, but they all had the same look, a bloodthirsty look. The great hole that gave rise to the monsters would only lead to extinction for humanity. Sir, unable to stop trembling before such foul creatures, took a few steps back, falling over some rubble, confirming his suspicion. That desolate landscape, that place devoid of all human life and whose place gave rise to its extinction. It was none other than the UA Academy itself. Suddenly, before his eyes, a human emerged from that hole that led directly to hell, enveloped in the deep darkness of the abyss. The beasts did not attack him, they just passed by him, ignoring him. There was no doubt that that being was the one who ruled them. Gathering every ounce of courage she had left, she tried to approach him, to try to see who it was, to stop that person before this happened, but after taking a few steps forward he smiled. That smile left him paralyzed with fear, his heartbeat increased, his blood pressure rose, his breathing became labored, he could feel in every cell of his body that he was fleeing, even though it was just one vision, it affected him in the present. His body reacted, his instincts took over, he tried to escape from the very death that human represented, and when he had managed to turn his body to run he saw him. Izuku Midoriya was in front of him, his appearance had changed a little, he looked bigger, he had clearly grown several centimeters, his features were more marked. 2 years perhaps had passed? He didn't know. The monsters ignored him, none of them paid attention to him. Were they the same person? How could he stand in such a desolate place without suffering any complications? Izuku, hey. His gaze looked intimidating, strong rays of a crimson-red color, as intense as blood, emanated from his right eye. So was filled with even more fear at what he saw. Was he really seeing him? Izuku, I hate it when people stare at me like that. Stretching out his hand, dozens of black whips came out of his hand, taking the form of various weapons, imbued with ice, fire, electricity, acid, among many others, they went straight towards him. Not even a second had passed when they reached him. If it were real, he would have died in less than a second. Sir, Agaghe! Falling to the ground as he screamed, completely hyperventilated, the guards at the door quickly entered ready to attack Izuku, but as he remained unconscious they put away their weapons. Sir, take me to Principal Nezu now. Not allowing the guards to ask what had happened, but upon learning his rank, one of them helped him up from the floor and accompanied him to the exit while communicating his request. Sir, what was that? Walking scared through the halls, it's the first time I feel something like that with a vision. It's impossible. Who was that other guy? Is he the same guy, only he moved so fast that I didn't notice? It was not impossible. His speed and strength would one day be superior to that of Almight, and that was what terrified him the most. Sir, Almight, you really made a mistake, there's no way he's the one. Izuku Midoriya, you are a monster. All for one smile crosses his mind, in the end, the fruits don't fall far from the tree. Because you are a man tied to his own future, believing he was free, that in his hands he had the power to choose the best path for everyone, but in reality he was a slave to what he thought was fate. Hospital, Izuku's room, 1 day later. Izuku, slowly opening his eyes. Where am I? The sunlight coming through the window irritated his sleepy eyes. He slowly got used to its light. Various sounds of machines at his side began to be heard by him. The young man turned his face, noticing a nurse monitoring the different machines. Seeing her, Izuku spoke in a louder tone. Izuku, excuse me, The nurse, upon hearing his voice, was frightened and dropped the papers on which she had written down the young man's signs. Nurse, please don't steal my quirk. The nurse ran out of the room in fear and ignorance. Izuku, yo no haria eso. Levantandos ligeramente la cama, espera como supo sobre, yo. Notando algo en su cuello que es esto? Al examinarlo bien se dio cuenta que se trataba de un collar la sola idea de tener uno lo abricio. Izuku, ¿quién me puso esto? Tomándolo con sus manos el intento quitárselo en maldición. No puedo intentando activar el one for all para finalmente deshacerse de esa cosa, pero hubo un problema porque no puedo activarlo? ¿Otra vez el mismo problema? Se preguntó por unos instantes, pero la misma velocidad rechazó tal idea, y esa etapa ya había terminado, no había dudas en su corazón, él nunca más tendría problemas para usarlo. Siguió insistiendo, notando que una serie de luces en el collar se encienden en el momento que intentaba usar su quirk, Pisa aberration despertado y que su cuerpo on se siente entumecido luego de tal prisión. Izuku siguió forciendo con más fuerzas. Izuku, que demonios es esta cosa? Nezu, es un dispositivo especial que evita que quien lo use pueda usar su quirk hablando desde la puerta de la habitación al lado de los dos guardias es bueno ver que despertaste joven miraría sonriendo, mientras con sus patas en sus bolsillos enviaba un signo. Izuku, Director Nezu? Quitando sus manos del collar un anulador de quirks. ¿Qué está pasando? ¿Por qué me pusieron esta cosa? Why por qué no me lo puedo quitar? Muchas preguntas en tan poco tiempo. A Nezu eso le molestaba, pero siguió con su actuación mostrando un rostro pacífico mientras se acercaba un poco más al joven confundido. Nezu, veras joven miraría. Lo que ahora mismo tienes puesto es el primer modelo de un collar anti-quirks, diseñado con el propósito que inhibe la activación de cualquier quirk y bien el dispositivo lo detecta saltando a la camilla para que no lo vean por debajo del hombro. Este modelo se usará en personas que representan un peligro para sí mismo o para la sociedad. Izuku, yo nunca usaría mi quirk para herir a los demás. Se cayó con fuerza, los guardias quisieron sacar sus armas, pero rápidamente Nezu les dio una señal con sus patas detrás de su espalda para que se detuvieran y no intervinieran. Nezu, lo joven miraría, intent explicar la situación a quienes decidieron que te pusieron esto fingiendo preocupación pero fue imposible. Además que no es por el one for all sorprendiendo a Izuku que él los supera sino por tu otro quirk. Silencio. El lugar quedó en un profundo silencio. No hacía falta decir más palabras para dar a entender de que el poder se refería. Nezu, during the battle, many conversations could be heard perfectly, among which your blood relationship with the leader of the villains. Izuku's eyes widened even more, also about how you accepted the all for one from your grandfather. His heart fluttered slightly. The young man intended to tell the truth only to those closest to him. But did everyone know? One thing was the people closest to him at the time of taking that power, but quite another was that every person in the world knew the truth. Nezu, when some heroes were yelling at you not to accept it, it was because we could all see and hear you. You disobeyed a direct order from the Hero Commission. You shouldn't have held his hand. This was the result. Her words, her tone, her gaze, her body posture, everything was part of her plan to make Izuku feel guilty for having taken what was rightfully his, to make him feel like he had made the wrong decision. Nezu, many civilians will feel safer if they know you have that at all times. Pretending to be worried again, please don't try to take it away. Izuku's body relaxed. He placed his hand on the collar for a few seconds only to then let it fall onto the stretcher. If that would make the civilians feel calmer, he could bear it at least until they fully trust that he would never hurt them. Izuku, okay, looking at the director who had a small smile. Director Nezu, what happened to the others? Where is Almight? Nezu, Almight is alive. After many surgeries they managed to treat his wounds. A heavy burden was removed from Izuku's shoulders. But it didn't last long. But both he and Endeavor were put into an induced coma due to the severity of their injuries. At that moment Izuku felt as if a bucket of extremely cold water had been thrown over his body. He clenched his fists helplessly. If only I had woken up earlier! He scolded himself, but quickly discarded that idea. What's done is done. Although without realizing it, tears ran down his cheeks upon learning of the state of his idol, his teacher, the man he can perfectly see as a second father to him. Nezu, take this young Midoriya, passing him a handkerchief and speaking to him in a kind tone. Don't worry. All Might is a very stubborn person. You'll see how once he recovers he will wake up and be with us once again. Izuku, thanks. He wanted to gain their trust, and to do so he needed these human moments of empathy, something illogical and completely absurd from his point of view, but necessary if he wanted to continue with his plans. Izuku, what happened to my friends, did they? Nezu, they're all fine, don't worry young man, smiling. The most hurt was you. When they brought you there you had many internal wounds, broken bones, torn muscles, calming Izuku even more while surprising him. It didn't surprise him now to feel somewhat stiff, although when they began to treat your wounds the doctors noticed how the ones with the least damage were already healing. Tell me, do you know anything about it? Izuku, no, shaking head. I'm sorry, but I have no idea about that, and right now I don't want to think about a reason. Nezu, I understand, young Midoriya, faking a smile again. Take your time to rest. Just promise me that when you discover the reason, tell me. The more information I have about it, the better I can help you. That didn't make sense, but in the condition Izuku was in, he couldn't even think clearly. He simply nodded. Nezu, young Midoriya, receiving a signal from one of the guards who left the room. I finally arrived. I know you're just waking up and you still have a lot of things to process, but someone wants to see you. Izuku, anyone? Looking at the door which opened again. Who? Recognizing that green hair instantly. Mom? Inko, Izuku. The kind woman ran to her son as soon as she entered the room and less than a second later gave him a warm hug, tears running down her cheeks. She was truly very worried about her son. Inko, Izuku. Izuku. Hugging with a strength she didn't even know she had. I'm glad you're okay. Pushing her cheeks together. I love you, son, never forget it. The emotion of the hug, that warmth, that love that was transmitted to him comforted his confused heart. But something was wrong, that tone with which he said those words. Inko, Izuku, listen to me. Moving away from the hug a little to hold his cheeks. No matter what they say about your father, Hisashi was a good man who always loved us. He never treated anyone badly. Please remember him that way. Izuku, Mom. Her eyes became moist again. Why are you telling me all these things? Inko, son, what happens is... With great pain he was going to tell the truth, but unfortunately for him the director Nezu got ahead of him, and once again spoke up, not really caring about the reunion between a mother and her son. Nezu, the truth is that for her safety reasons Mrs. Midoriya will have to enter a protection program. Staring at her, transmitting with his gaze that she should not say anything else because everything was revealed in the fight, and later omitting the fact that he also contributed to keep her safe. She will have to be sent to a secret address until they are sure that her life is not in danger. Looking now at Izuku, the criminal world is full of threats, and possibly some want to attack them just because of their link with him. The mere mention of that man created tension in poor Inko's body, which Izuku could notice in his arms. Nezu, it would have been best if Mrs. Midoriya had already been taken to the safe zone, but I advocated that they wait until you woke up. Young Midoriya smiling so they can say goodbye, moving away a little like the guards who didn't say anything. They just stayed watching. You have a few minutes, make good use of that time. A final phrase with a hidden message that only Inko understood. She didn't know many things, she was only certain that if she tried to talk to her son again about the little she knew, things would get more complicated for both of them. She was thinking about the well-being of her only son. He is still young, but he has already lived his life, enjoyed its beauty, knew love, and was fortunate enough to have it reciprocated. He had a wonderful son of whom he will always be proud, and for that very reason she would bear that burden. Izuku is just beginning to live, to fulfill his dream. The longing, the ideal, that he wants to achieve is utopian and therefore impossible, but as his mother, she fully trusts that he will achieve it somehow. The seconds were pressing, but she still had so much to tell him. Then she remembered the song she sang to him before leaving for camp, that song she often heard her husband sing, a beautifully tragic song that her mother composed. But there was another one. A happier one. That's why, starting to hum, Inko began to sing the lyrics of said song. Oh little one, bring it close to you and raise that light that is within you. With love in your eyes that praise the eternal red writing. The wind gallops and chases the paradise of the little ones, without knowing anything of the hidden betrayal that smiled. To the dream of salvation and peace. Stay alive in the storm, gentlemen, become heroes. With both hands. Sharpen your wisdom and take the seeds of light. Facing the end of pain, with a temple lodged hidden in my heart. Healing wounds with tears. The taste of purity is close to burning the round destiny. In time of war, gentlemen, become heroes. Keep your wish decisive, beloved knight. Open the future and go at all costs to fulfill your wishes. Even if you disappear after a long time. Fight and turn even the unclean into power. They will go through deserts to this war. so that you may be free to enjoy the land of dawn. Raise your desire into a fleeting dream and move forward to make it the foundation of the future. At the end of her song, the loving mother gave her son a tender kiss on the forehead. The hug ended. Slowly Inko moved away from Izuku, who kept his arms raised, in an instinct so that his mother would not leave his side. Inko, I have to go now, honey. Her eyes became moist. Don't worry, everything's going to be okay, okay. Turning around so he wouldn't see her cry again, remember that I will always love you, my little lucky star. Without saying anything else, the woman left the room accompanied by the guards, clenching her hands tightly to control her trembling from the fear she was feeling, giving her best effort not to scare her precious son. Nezu, finally all this ridiculousness is over. Don't worry, young Midoriya. Left alone with Izuku, I will convince those in charge of your security to at least allow you to communicate through letters. A lie disguised as the truth. Izuku, lowering his arms, what will happen to me now? Nezu, many parents have been calling me, demanding that I expel you from the academy for fear that you are a danger to the other students. Izuku looked at him. Even the other academies have communicated that they would never accept you in their facilities. Noticing how Izuku clenched his fists, but I am not like them. Impressing him, I am totally opposed to the idea of expelling you. To his greatest surprise, the Nezu director had bowed. Nezu, young Midoriya, I am still very aware of the incident you went through with the teachers of my academy. I have no words that can justify their behavior. I am very sorry. Lies after lies were the only things that came out of his lips, although Izuku hadn't noticed it yet. Nezu, by government orders I can't do anything about the collar you're wearing, but in terms of authority in the academy I'm the one who has the last word. Still maintaining the bow. That's why I won't pay attention to the requests of the other parents, and I'll let you continue receiving an education in the hero department. Getting up from the bow, I only ask that you trust us once again. After all, this is your hero academy, young Midoriya. Izuku just nodded. What else could he do? Where could he go? With the news that Almight was in a coma due to the severity of his injuries, due to the sudden departure of his mother, the young man didn't want to be alone. Nezu used his last minutes of his visit to inform him about the dormitories and that all the students would be living in the academy's own facilities. However, he would not be with the others. While he had the final say, he also had to give some security to the parents of the other students. That was why I told him that he would live in a small cabin built a few meters behind the bedrooms, assuring him that, despite being small, he would not lack anything, and that he would have all the possible comforts to make him feel comfortable. As the day ended, Nezu apologized again for the incident with the teachers, making sure that he spoke to each and every one of them, assuring them that something like that would never happen again. Before walking out the door, the principal told him that he believed in his dream and that one day he would become a great hero. Nezu, walking down the hospital hallway, you, a hero, holding back his laughter. That will never happen. How easy it is to manipulate people if you tell them the right words, those words they most want to hear. Looking at his cell phone, making sure of a few things. Now that All Might is out of the equation, I can start to influence him. Gain his trust, unable to hide his twisted smile, make him transfer the one for all to a more manipulable carrier, increasing his smile. And the best thing is that now I can also get the all for one. His paws formed a fist after putting away his phone, and once he left the hospital he stopped smiling in that twisted way, not raising any suspicion. Nezu, how unpleasant it was to have to apologize, feeling disgust, but it was necessary. In order to fulfill my objective, it doesn't matter what I have to do or who I have to sacrifice. Thinking about Sir and the members of the commission, young Midoriya, you have completely changed my plans, but I genuinely thank you for something. You gave me a much greater objective. Because you are. Already alone in his room, Izuku wanted to distract his mind. His first option was to get up and walk, but his legs were still too numb and sore for that. He thought about calling a nurse, but discarded the idea. He didn't want to scare another person. Looking around the room, he saw the television remote control and without thinking, he turned it on. That was a bad idea. All the channels were broadcasting the same topic, talking about his life, the incident with the sludge villain, the fights against the Momo in the Ust, the hero killer, the time he saved Island. All of his struggles were being put on trial, debating whether they were real or an elaborate act to gain the public's trust. Changing the channel, finding themselves interviewing the parents of their former high school classmates who had been turned by Nomus and killed in front of everyone in the great battle, the mothers continued to mourn the loss of their children, arguing that they were good students, that they had a whole life ahead of them. But they were turned into monsters and merciless killers, without even trying to return them to normal. Some teachers were terrified, not knowing if they would one day suffer the same fate. Since they were fired and their record was tainted, everyone they could find was in a similar situation. They had not been able to find a job again, some had even lost their homes. They were living on the streets. Somehow, everyone was implying that it was Izuku's fault. If only he had kept quiet, if only he had remained hidden, if only he was about to turn off the television, the last thing he needed was this. But before he could do so, a woman spoke. Secretary, what? Looking at the camera while still lying on her stretcher, now they're blaming a child? Detective Tsukachi's secretary was being interviewed. She had many bandages around her body, but she maintained a warm smile despite everything. Secretary, if it weren't for All Might and Izuku Midoriya, I would be dead right now. Smiling at the camera. If you see this, I can only tell you one word, bowing slightly despite the pain. Thank you. One word, one simple word has too much impact. If it is sincere, not much more is needed. Izuku changed the channel one last time. There were two commentators on it. The first one was repeating the same topics, who assured them that it was all an act. Izuku had begun to question that fact. They all said the same thing. It was as if they had memorized a script, and this was nothing more than a play. It wasn't until the second commentator spoke that things changed a bit. What everyone is saying doesn't make sense. I speak in a firm tone. That young man has come out very hurt from all those confrontations that I remind you would have been difficult for an ordinary hero to overcome, and therefore many lives would have been in danger. Those words made Izuku inadvertently move a little closer to the screen, but still without getting off the stretcher. You just have to remember the first incident that made him famous, where about a year ago he rushed to save his high school classmate from a villain who had kidnapped him. I would never forget that day. There were 3 professional heroes in the place who did nothing and only shouted at that young man who was suffocating to resist. His look said it all. It was a clear criticism of the actions of those heroes. Izuku Midoriya at that time had no power, and yet he rushed to help him. No one knew All Might's true appearance. It was impossible for them to know that he would arrive on the scene. What we witnessed that day was a true act of heroism. The other commentator remained silent, as did the audience present at the show. Opinions were divided, but they just had to think things through and not let fear and ignorance get the better of them in order to see the truth. Unfortunately, there were some issues that everyone agreed on. I still trust that young man, but I am worried that those 2 powerful quirks are in the hands of a child of only 15 years old. With a heavy sigh he continued speaking. I personally think that those quirks should be in the hands of trained adults, who can give them a responsible use. One for all, his power was ridiculously great. Knowing the truth, and from the accumulation of energy over the generations, everyone understood that Izuku not only had the strength of All Might, but that he would eventually surpass him, and by far. They saw her as a sample of that future. All for one, the ability to steal the powers of others, to make them completely yours without any consequences, without any limitations, in a world where what is most valued are people's quirks. That there exists a power capable of stealing them was truly terrifying. With several top heroes missing due to the severity of their injuries, society is currently vulnerable, and I don't think we have the luxury of expecting Izuku Midoriya to perfectly control those. The screen had turned off. Izuku had done it. He stared at the black screen, observing his reflection, looking closely at that necklace, without knowing that everything he saw was part of Nezu's plans. Start making him feel social pressure. But he forgot one detail. Izuku, I see, bringing his hands to his lips to form a big smile. I just have to show them that my actions are genuine. An iron will, his unwavering desire to be a hero. Although, not even he knew how much he could resist. Izuku, I want. Looking at the door, I want to see All Might. At the same time, in another room in the same hospital, the director was talking to another family. Bakugo's room. Mitsuki, how are you? Katsuki, I'm fine. He was conscious, covered in bandages all over his body, especially on his hands. Doctors had already said that he would have a large, permanent scar on his back. Mitsuki, Katsuki, you don't have to act tough, let me call a nurse so that. Katsuki, I already told you I'm fine. Lie. His burns were very deep. Even though he had been given a large dose of painkillers, the pain he felt now was overwhelming. He had trouble breathing, and he was disgusted by the smell of burnt flesh that still emanated from him. Luckily for him, the door to the room began to open, and with it he got something to distract himself from his constant pain. Nezu, hello, young Bakugo, I speak in a calm tone. I'm glad to see that you've calmed down. Staring at Mitsuki, is your husband in the hospital? I would like to talk to all of you. Mitsuki, and no, lowering his head a little, he asked for permission from work, but they denied it, clenching his fists in anger. When he leaves, he will come directly here, taking his son's hand with great care, but he can talk to me right now. I will pass on the message. Nezu, I understand, nodding, but can we talk outside? Mitsuki, I don't plan on leaving my son's side. Katsuki looked at her in surprise at her serious tone. Whatever you have to tell me, do it here. With a sigh, the director looked at Katsuki, and then back at Mitsuki. Nezu, the first thing I want to tell you is to apologize for what? Mitsuki, get straight to the point, Nezu. If his tone showed his anger, what happened at the camp was his fault. The academy had the responsibility of ensuring his safety. Instead, the camp was attacked by villains, his son kidnapped and tortured by them. Nezu, well, his gaze became more serious. Young Bakugo, due to the severity of your injuries, I regret to inform you that I will have to transfer you from the hero course to general courses. Katsuki, what? The false concern disappeared the moment he was direct with his words. For mother and son it was a strong impact, and even more so for the son, whose eyes began to moisten at the news. Nezu, the academy will take care of covering all your medical expenses, and Recovery Girl will personally take care of your rehabilitation. Turning to head for the door, I still think you can become a great hero, so when your hands improve with the help of recovery, I can transfer you back to the hero department. Although slowly closing the door, only if you continue at the academy will Recovery be able to attend to you regularly. The door slammed shut, leaving the young man devastated, bowing his head, his hair covering his eyes, biting his lips to hold back the tears. The smell of burning flesh intensified his senses. His back burned intensely. Unable to help himself, he remembered when he attacked a defenseless Izuku, how when they ended up he was just lying on the ground complaining of a strong burning pain in his back. Now he understood what he had put him through for more than 10 years. Mitsuki was clearly angry at the crude way he said those words, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't want to upset her son more than he already was. Right now what he needed most was Mitsuki, everything will be fine. Katsuki hugging his son gently. Katsuki, leave me alone. Struggling, but his mother wouldn't let go. I want to be alone. Mitsuki, I already told you. Her tone showed that she was holding back her tears. You don't have to pretend, at least not while you're in my arms. Drops. A few light drops began to fall on his arm. Mitsuki, it's okay to cry right now, you foolish son. Katsuki, I already told you that I. The farce collapsed. Katsuki Bakugo had started to cry again in front of his mother, who only hugged him a little tighter. Unbeknownst to both of them, how Izuku was right now were two sides of the same coin, opposite and equal at the same time. Two young men injured in different ways, one possessing two of the most powerful quirks ever recorded, the other due to the injury to his hands had lost the ability to use it. One being in his mother's arms comforting him, and the other being completely alone in his room wishing to have her with him. Life is really unfair. Izuku's room, several hours later. Izuku, okay, I can get up now. The twilight was all over his explorer, the dim light of day filtered through the window of the room. Several hours had passed. The only visits he received were from the nurse who brought him his respective meals and medications. Izuku received them with kindness and calm that made that woman slowly let go of her fear. He tried to look at his phone to distract himself. Luckily his camp belongings had been taken to his room. He didn't know who could have been responsible, but he had an idea. Inside his belongings there was a small folded sheet, with a single word written, "Thank you," next to a drawing of a cat. Izuku, I'm still surprised that I can already stand up after using 100% looking out the window. Even if a medical quirk was used, it was too fast. It was very accelerated, and suddenly the idea came to his mind, the quirk of the second bearer, gear change, bringing his hand to his forehead while thinking, that feeling where my body accelerated or how in battle it stopped in an instant. Many ideas went through his head. That must have been the reason why the effect of Stain's quirk passed ahead of time during the fight in the alley. Coming to a conclusion, the gear change can also speed up my metabolism, including my healing. So many ideas crossed his mind. A truly practical quirk. With its help he could enhance his training by making his muscles relax in the same way, but in the shortest possible time, allowing him to train again in the same day. He quickly wanted to write down his thoughts in his notebook, but before starting he stopped. Something told him it was a bad idea. Suspicion began to creep into his mind. For the moment he would keep that thought to himself. Let me through right now. His thoughts were interrupted by the commotion outside his room, but even though that voice was powerless and intimidating, Izuku was surprised to hear it again. After all, it was his. Guard, please stop. Guard, we have no orders to let her through. Their voices denoted fear. Izuku quickly went to the door of his room and began to open it. New order! The advance of his hand stopped, seeing that green hair beginning to peek through the door. An instant later they both stared at each other. The tension increased, silence prevailed. It seemed like it was the beginning of a battle. Star and Stripe, little brother. That idea couldn't be more wrong. With a cheerful tone, with her usual smile, the hero lunged towards Izuku and began to hug him, taking advantage of their difference in height and strength to shake him from one side to the other while maintaining her hug. Guards, what a drastic change of attitude. Izuku, Star what? Star and Stripe, what did I tell you about calling me sister? His movement stopped, but he did not let go of his strong arms without letting him touch the ground with his feet. Izuku but Star. A faint creaking sound began to be heard. The hero hugged her little brother tighter. It was his bones that creaked a little. Star and Stripe, I'd travel an ocean to see you, and this is how you greet me? Izuku, sorry. Star. A new creaking sound was heard as sister. The force of the hug ceased, but the hero did not let go. She brought him back down to earth, and this time gave him a real hug full of warmth. Star and Stripe, I'm glad you're okay. Izuku, returning the hug, thanks. A nice moment had been created. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. Guard, Izuku Midoriya, you have to re-enter the room. You are not allowed to leave until further notice. His demanding tone did not please the strong woman at all, who, upon separating from his embrace, stood next to her brother and placed her hand on his right shoulder. Star and Stripe, he hasn't committed any crime. His serious look scared the guards a little. They don't have the right to detain him. He immediately turns to look at him, noticing the collar on his neck, only getting angrier about it. Guard, he made illegal use of his quirk, that's why. A pathetic excuse. The guards trembled before the imposing figure of the woman before them. Luckily for them, someone came to save them, but that was not their intention. Aizawa, during the camp I gave them the order to use their quirks to defend themselves from the villains arriving at the hallway with a look full of dark circles, many more than usual. I take full responsibility for that matter. Izuku, Aizawa-sensei smiling at seeing his teacher with only a few bandages on his body. The guards immediately make a call to report what happened and request instructions. Aizawa, decide quickly, smiling under his ribbons, otherwise you will have to face her, and she doesn't look happy at all. Star's imposing gaze remained on them. Only a few seconds had passed, but for these men it seemed like hours. To their relief, they both communicated the orders they had received. Guard, Eraserhead, now you are in charge of guarding Izuku Midoriya. Both men walked away, leaving a very tired teacher who sighed as he leaned against the wall. Aizawa, how annoying looking at the woman. Come in and talk all you want. Star and Stripe, I appreciate it, smiling slightly. I drag Izuku to his room again. Aizawa, I want closing his eyes. I want to sleep a lot longer. He was tired, much more than usual. During these few hours since the truth was known, he had not stopped receiving calls from various sources. Members of the commission, parents, other teachers from different academies, reporters, among many others. Aizawa, wanting a rest, sat up as he continued to lean against the wall, finally falling asleep shortly after the hallway had fallen silent. Izuku, Aizawa-sensei, seemed very tired. Leaving that topic aside, I look at the hero. I mean, sister, I'm glad to see you again. But why? Her words were silenced again by a hug from the woman. This time there was something different, a feeling that inhabited the woman's heart. Guilt. Star and Stripe, everything is going to be okay, little brother, don't worry. Separating from the hug to try to smile in the same way as the hero they admire so much, because I'm here. Izuku then remembered his teacher's words from long ago. Those in which he made it clear to him that despite being the first-ranking hero in Japan, it didn't mean he was the only one. The others could take care of protecting the civilians. With that in mind, Izuku didn't ask about it again. He already knew what answer he would get, and besides, she already said that she came to see him. It would be very rude of him to question her arrival. So, brother and sister were able to talk to each other a little. They didn't need to have a blood bond to feel close. That Star continued to treat him the same way made Izuku's heart happy. Endeavor's room a few minutes earlier. Shuko, here, you must be tired. Handing her a hot drink. Fuyumi, thanks Shuko. Both sisters were observing their father, connected to various tubes that monitored his vital signs. His entire body was covered with bandages, but what stood out most was something that was missing. He had lost his left arm. Shuko, have you heard anything from Natsuo? Fuyumi, no. Her eyes were moist and a little red. She was crying while her sister was away. I called her several times, but she didn't answer. She held back her tears. She was the one who most wanted to have been a normal family, to be united, but that was an impossible wish. Added to all that, she had one more concern to think about. It was not until she felt the warm arms of her sister who hugged her gently. Shuko, go with her. Surprising her. You're also worried about her, aren't you? Smiling, I'll stay with the old man. Fuyumi, but you. Feeling her tears running down her cheeks. Your friend doesn't. Speaking haltingly due to her sea of deep emotions, it would have been difficult for another person to understand, but Shuko knew her very well. Shuko, forget about me and put yourself first for once. Hugging her a little tighter. Also, when she went to get your drink, those guards were still at the door of her room, frowning a little after being able to talk to Izuku. Fuyumi, thank you. Separating from the hug and before hugging him completely, she gave him a small kiss on the forehead. That Midoriya boy really changed you for the better. I hope to meet him soon. Smiling as she begins to leave. I'm going to see her now. If something happens, let me know. Shuko, yes, I say the same to you. So Fuyumi headed to her partner's room. It was really reassuring that her little sister knew and accepted their relationship. She had something in mind, to help that boy as much as she could. He was the one who melted Shuko's heart. He was the one who began to change her father, and if it weren't for him, she would have lost him in battle just like her partner. Shuko, Dad staying alone in the room. I still haven't forgiven you for what you did to me and my mother. Holding his only hand while a solitary tear ran down his scar. So you better wake up. I have a lot of things to talk to you about. She had also noticed his change, starting to occur during the sports festival, during the end of the fight against Stain, when she not only personally took Izuku to a hospital, but also paid for all his treatment with her own money. And now what happened in the great battle. Momo's room. Ai, honey! Bursting into the room. How are you? Rushing to hug her. Are you hurt? Did you hurt yourself? Momo, see, calm down. Mom, somewhat nervous about her mother's attitude. I was only admitted for using up almost all my lipids, but I feel fine now. Ai, good. In that case, his concern turned into anger, so he stopped hugging her and started pulling her cheeks. How could you leave the hospital alone to go to such a dangerous place? Crying more intensely. Do you want to give me a heart attack? Momo had begun to cry. It was not because of the pain on her face, but because of seeing her mother like that. Ai again hugged her beloved daughter tightly, and with a broken voice she continued speaking. Ai, first the attack on the USJ, against that assassin, the island, the camp, and now this. I forbid you to scare me like this again. I don't think I can resist something like this again. Momo also apologized in whispers. Mother and daughter hugged each other for several minutes in complete silence, except for an occasional sob from one of them. Momo, Mom looking at her while both of them wiped away their tears. Where's Dad? Confused at not seeing him normally, he would have started screaming for me as soon as I entered the hospital. A light laugh lightened the mood between them. AI, that's true, but it's only because just like me, he cares a lot about you stroking his daughter's hair. Your father couldn't come today, honey. He had a lot of important things to do at work. A half-truth. Momo, is everything okay? Tilting head. AI, yes, these are adult topics, honey. For now, just focus on recovering as soon as possible. Momo accepted his words, confident that it wasn't something so serious, that as usual her father would solve it, and come running to see her a serious mistake. The truth is that at this moment Ryuji Yayorozu was in a meeting with his investors and board of directors of his company, receiving serious accusations and questions for having such important ties with Izuku Midoriya. Coming to receive strong accusations that Yayorozu Industries was secretly financing villains, which made no sense, but the simple unfounded rumor had caused the company's shares to begin to plummet. Many vultures would take advantage of the opportunity. His family's legacy would hang in the balance. And Momo at some point will have to make a tough decision. Almight room. Melissa, Uncle Might. Minutes passed, and she was finally able to go in to see him. What she saw broke her heart. Seeing all those sensors connected to his body, the huge amount of bandages covering him, the image from her childhood where that man looked so strong and indestructible, now he just looked very fragile. Star and Stripe, oh, I see you're busy. A light voice came from behind her. She hadn't noticed when the heroine had opened it. Star and Stripe, sorry to interrupt you, I'll wait outside. Melissa, no, it's okay, shaking head, you can be here too. Star and Stripe, thank you. With a warm smile she accepted and entered the room to close the door. All Might is someone admirable. Something like this will not stop him for long. Placing his hand on her shoulder when we least expect it, he will wake up and want to go out and patrol the streets. He tried to comfort her. He knew that his father was a close friend of the great hero. He had no doubt that Dr. Shield would come to visit him. But for now he did not want to leave his daughter alone, in a country she did not yet know, where her greatest bond is in that state. She was bad at it. The gesture was nice, but it wasn't like they had a great bond. They had seen each other before, but they didn't interact much. A hero is not one who only saves people's bodies, but also their hearts, was a phrase she heard a while ago. Star and Stripe, by the way, staring at her, my little brother woke up. You can go see him now if you want. Melissa, thanks, but I want to stay here a little longer. The minutes passed. Both women remained silent, feeling the company of the other. After almost half an hour, Melissa finally got up from her seat, thanked the hero for the company, and left the room to now see Izuku. Star and Stripe, now completely alone with the hero, we finally see each other in person again. Taking him by the hand while speaking in a somewhat dejected tone. Star and Stripe, although I didn't want it to be this way, her lips trembled for a moment. In my heart you are my teacher. Seeing you in this state as her hands trembled a little, I will never forget the day you saved my life. From that day on I was able to give myself over to a wonderful dream. That day when everything began for her, everything when the great hero saved her and gave her a warm smile. At that beautiful memory, she wiped away her few tears, and just like her hero, she also smiled. Star and Stripe, I will protect and teach my little brother until you wake up. That will be my way of paying you back for the favor I owe you. Separating one of his hands, you may not remember me, but having an idea and then taking the keychain with his figure out of his pocket. Forget what I told you. As payment I would like you to give me your autograph on this keychain. Nothing would make me happier. No matter what anyone might tell her about her own government, she had already made up her mind. She would not back down. She was very stubborn after all. And about that promise only fate will decide if it will be fulfilled. Izuku's room. Momo. I finally managed to lose her. The night had begun. At one point Momo wanted to see Izuku, and when she told her mother, she told her to rest and that she would see him once she was completely healed. But taking advantage of a small carelessness on her part, she left her room and set out to find him. It wasn't difficult. She guessed that it was the one where her teacher was sleeping next to the door. She entered silently. Momo, Izuku, I came to see you. Are you awake? Surprised, she saw how both Melissa and Shuko had visited him before her, and the three of them shared a warm hug between them. Izuku, Momo. happy to see her, but noticing her hospital clothes. Are you hurt? Momo, no, I'm fine, it's just that why do you keep hugging him? Quickly changing the subject, she questioned that fact, and even more so that despite everything, both of them did not let go. Shuko, I recently returned from taking care of my father. Melissa, I was the first one to arrive after being with Uncle Might. Speaking at the same time, her tone was somewhat muffled. Momo instantly regretted raising her voice. It was clear that her friends were not having a good time. Momo, I'm sorry. Shuko, it's okay. Melissa, sorry I didn't go see you too. Izuku, Momo moving his hands slightly over Shuko and Melissa's shoulders. Come. Unable to help herself, she slowly approached. Her friends opened a small space between them and she joined in. Now the four of them shared a warm hug. Izuku, I'm glad that the three of you are okay. There were no more words to say. Being together gave them the peace of mind they needed at the moment. Looking at them closely, Izuku's heart beat fast. He felt happy to have them by his side again. Not even a week had passed since they left for camp, but with everything they experienced, it seemed like an eternity. Izuku, Looking up, Izuku had blushed completely. None of the three understood what was happening. It was not until Shuko and Melissa turned their gaze towards where Izuku was looking that they discovered it. Melissa, hey Momo. Momo, yes? Shuko, aren't you cold? Momo, huh? What do you mean? Her face, just like Izuku's, turned bright red. The hospital clothes she was wearing had come loose at the moment she joined the hug, completely revealing her back and butt in plain sight. Even wearing simple underwear didn't help. Izuku, despite everything, is still a young man entering adolescence. Momo, and now let's talk. A minute later the four of them were sitting on the stretcher in different corners. Melissa and Shuko were covering Momo as much as possible with their bodies. Izuku, before we start touching the necklace, Melissa, do you recognize this? Melissa, thinking for a few seconds, no, I'm sorry, confused, what is that necklace? A light chat began. Izuku told them about how his mother had to be taken to a safe location for her safety, which they thought was strange. He also explained to them what that necklace entailed. Naturally they got angry, but luckily and at the young man's request they didn't make a big fuss, at least for now. Izuku, it's uncomfortable and I don't like having it on, but smiling slightly, I'm sure that once I prove that I'm not like him, they'll take it off. I'm not like my grandfather. I was still very naive. Shuko, Izuku, his tone was serious, why did you accept that power? Izuku, I don't know, looking at his hand, this, all for one, is my original quirk. Various memories came to his mind when I was diagnosed quirkless. I refused to accept it. For a long time I tried everything, levitating objects, expelling fire from my mouth, releasing a small laugh. I guess something inside me told me that I had a power from birth. The young man clenched his fists tightly. His tone changed to a stronger one. He held back his anger even when everyone yelled at me not to accept it. Sighed to calm down. I don't regret it. I feel like I did the right thing for me. No one knew what to say. Something had changed. He seemed more determined, very different from how he had been at the camp. He still maintained his optimism, but it was noticeable that he had matured a little. No one noticed a subtle blush on his cheeks. "Ai, where are you, Momo?" Hearing the worried voice of the mother, just a few seconds passed before she slammed the door open. Her gaze focused on her daughter, who used her friends' bodies as shields. She didn't want to feel her cheeks being squeezed so hard again. Izuku, hey Ai-san, nervous. How long has it been since we last saw each other? Speaking in defense of her friend, Izuku was the center of attention of the woman. When she saw him, she approached silently. Her eyes were hidden by her hair. She seemed angry, but to her surprise and that of the girls. "Ai, Izuku-kun." Hugging him without caring that Izuku's face sank between her breasts. "Momo, why didn't you tell me that Izuku-kun had woken up?" "Momo, what are you doing?" The young boy did not need his danger sensor to know of the threat that was near him. "Ai, I'm sorry." He separating from the hug and walking away a few steps. "I was just worried. Inko-san would understand me." Looking around the room, "By the way, where is she? I'd like to talk to her again." Izuku, she lowering his head a little while lowering his tone of voice. "Is complicated." Without knowing the reason, Ai again approached the young man and hugged him again, but in a lighter way, but still transmitting a feeling of warmth. I don't know what's going on, but you have my number if you ever want to talk about Inko-san stroking her hair. If you've seen the news lately, don't pay attention to them. They just don't really know you. Lifting her face to look her directly in the eyes. No matter what happens, you will always be welcome in our house. What a warm feeling. It was no wonder Yorozu was the same in many ways as Inko Midoriya. Both felt a great and deep love for their children. A feeling that only those who are mothers can understand. The three girls who were watching this scene didn't say anything, except for Momo, who was pouting slightly. Still, they were happy that despite everything that happened and how they were talking nonstop about Izuku, the people who really knew him didn't think that way now that the truth was known. I'll go to the cafeteria for something to eat. Separating from the hug and heading towards the door. By the way, be careful if you're going out. There's a homeless man sleeping next to your door, Izuku-kun. When the door finally closed, none of the four could hold back their laughter. Hearing how their teacher was mistaken for a homeless man was very funny to them, although of course they wouldn't tell Aizawa about it. Izuku, your mother is very kind. Momo. I know. Both stared at each other. I'm proud to be her daughter. Getting a little closer. The same can be said of Inko-san. She's a great mother who raised an incredible son, a hero. Without realizing it, both young people approached each other, their hands touched, their fingers slowly intertwined. A single light illuminated the room, making the stars easily visible through the window. Unable to avoid it, the faces of both slowly approached each other. Momo, my hero. The words spoken at the sports festival took on importance now. That time when Izuku told him directly that he would also be his hero crossed both of their minds. Izuku, Momo, Momo, Izuku ehhhhh. The cute moment was interrupted when her hospital clothes had come loose again, and in order to cover herself she moved her hand away, with her face red from embarrassment and anger. Momo looked back, noticing how Shuko and Melissa acted with shameless dissimulation. But before he could say anything again, the door to the room was opened. Star and Stripe, little brother, I've decided. With great joy from now on Her eyes opened suddenly, seeing Izuku in the same bed with three other girls and where one of her underwear was visible made her have a smile of great pride. Star and Stripe, I can't believe you've grown so much. Pretending to wipe away a tear. I'll leave you two alone to have fun. Slowly closing the door. Izuku/Momo, huh? Star and Stripe, don't forget to use protection, haha. Izuku/Momo, it's not what it seems. A few minutes later, all the lights in the room were on. Momo was embarrassed while Melissa and Shuko were amused by her actions. Star and Stripe, I see, so that's what was happening here. Izuku, why yeah, it was just that. Just as embarrassed as Momo. What did you want to tell me? Wanting to change the subject. Star and Stripe, true. You see, her smile widened as she brought her hand right to her chest. I've decided that from now on she'll be a teacher at your academy. Izuku, huh? Star and Stripe, I hope you're prepared. My workouts are pretty demanding. Izuku, ehhhhh. Surprised like the girls be, but what about your job as the #1 hero in the United States? Director Nezu approved that. Can you do that? Star and Stripe, closing his mouth, don't worry about the details. I'll take care of everything later, little brother. After that they talked a little more, answering the girls' questions. The hero seemed more interested in Melissa, whom she asked again about the necklace that Izuku was wearing. Her answer was the same, negative, but she had planted the seed of doubt in her, so she would investigate it and ask her father about it. At the end of his talk, Star told the girls that it was best for Izuku to have one last night of rest. Things were going to change from now on, and they would also need all their energy for the upcoming training. Shuko and Melissa said goodbye with a hug, and Momo, still embarrassed, waved her hand. Neither of them had forgotten their pending conversation, but it had to be done in complete privacy. Izuku's sister, before you go. Star and Stripe, yeah? Turning his body to look him directly in the eyes. Now they were alone. What's wrong, little brother? Izuku, since you are #1 in the United States, lightly scratching his cheek, I was wondering if you could do me a favor. Star and Stripe, if you mention my rank I assume it's something important. Izuku nodded. Okay, I hear you. Hospital entrance? Momo, It's so good to have my normal clothes back. Walking through the halls towards the exit, Momo was still complaining about what he had done to her, not only for the fact of almost leaving her in full view of Izuku, but for interrupting them in that long-awaited moment. AI, did something happen while I was gone? Momo, no pouting, nothing happened. AI, it's clear that something happened. Sigh. By the way, girls, it's getting late. Looking at them gently, I know this is sudden, but would you like to spend the night at our house? Shuko/Melissa, I think it means mansion. AI, I know it's very hasty, but I wouldn't like them to be left alone. She was truly a very kind woman. Shuko, I appreciate it. Mrs. Yayorozu making a small bow. I doubt any of my brothers will arrive tonight. AI, not at all ladylike. It makes me feel a bit old looking at Melissa. What about you, dear? Melissa, I also accept your kindness, ma'am. Noticing how she made a pout identical to Momo's, I say AI-san. AI, okay, it's decided. Clapping enthusiastically as they left the hospital, and a limo was already waiting for them. Tonight is girls' night. Filled with joy, she entered the limousine with those 3 girls on the way to her mansion. Despite her cheerful attitude, it was just a facade. She was worried for many reasons, but she would not let those adult themes be passed on to children who had just left a battlefield. The duty of adults was to protect the new generation. After the luxurious vehicle moved away, new sounds of footsteps were heard, only to stop in the middle of the hallway. Star and Stripe, if you have something to say to me, do it face to face. Nezu, wow, I thought you wouldn't notice. Coming out from around the corner, you caused quite a stir today with your arrival. Disgusted that they were looking down on him. It wasn't very professional of you to have intimidated those guards who were just doing their duty. Sighing, may I ask what the reason for your visit is? Star and Stripe, ignoring her questions, were you the one responsible for putting that damn collar on my little brother? Her fists trembled slightly. Nezu, so what if it was like that? Looking at her with defiant eyes. Star and Stripe, he's not an animal to put something like that on. Nezu had a little tick at those words. Take it away from him as soon as possible. Opening his hand. Or else. Nezu, or else what? His tone was louder. You may be the #1 hero of the United States, but right now, before the laws of this country, you are just another foreigner. His tone was more marked, with some contempt. You do not have any authority here. Smiling, your arrival alone has already generated diplomatic conflicts. If you do anything else, these conflicts will escalate. A duel of glances had begun. Either back down. Both were firm in their convictions, until finally their conversation resumed. Star and Stripe, I want to take Almight's place as a teacher at UA Academy. Nezu, impossible. Due to recent renovations, we do not have the budget to hire new staff. Star and Stripe, I don't need any payment from you. I just have one request. Nezu, squinting, why? Star and Stripe, I have my reasons. Smiling subtly, would you reject the #1 teacher in the United States who doesn't even get paid? Nezu knew that it was about Izuku again. He knew of the brotherhood relationship that those two had. He thought about the advantages and disadvantages of accepting his request. On the one hand, there was the fact of gaining Izuku's trust. By accepting her into his ranks, this could be reinforced. There was also the fact of the status of the academy. Having the #1 hero of the United States teach would regain the trust they lost after the attack on the camp. As negative points, there is Star's own intervention. Her mere presence could delay all their plans. But he also thought that they had lost their symbol of peace, that many top heroes were very injured and 3 already recognized heroes lost their quirks, ending their career. Having her by his side would imply that he convinced her to protect the city in the absence of his own heroes. He knew that his intervention would delay everything, that it could influence some students, but the benefits were greater, so he had no other choice. Nezu, very well, but looking her straight in the eyes, depending on that request you make, the deal is cancelled. What is it about? Star and Stripe, my little brother, shaking his head. Izuku wants to talk to him. Getting serious like Nezu, that's the only thing I ask. Nezu, I'll make some calls. Turning around to start leaving. I'll give you an answer to that request early tomorrow morning. So the director had left the hospital. Star also did the same. Putting on a sweatshirt, she left for a small hotel near the hospital. There she would rest and could answer her now thousands of messages on her phone. The hours passed after that, Almost all the lights in the hospital were off. Many were already sleeping, many except Izuku. He was already feeling fine, his legs were completely healed. The only sign of his injuries was a new scar on his right arm after carrying out his last attack. Wanting to get some air, the young man got up from the stretcher, grabbed his phone in case he needed some light, and finally left that room where he had been confined for several hours. Aizawa continued sleeping peacefully. In truth, he was very tired. In silence, Izuku set out to find a terrace where he could feel the fresh air on his face. He wanted to feel the cold night breeze caressing his face. As he walked, he could see in the distance a small customer service stand, where two nurses were on duty, talking to each other about their day. Thinking that everyone was already asleep, they didn't bother to speak openly. "How good it is to be young." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the UA students who participated in that terrible battle." "Those who were discharged this morning?" "Yes," laughing lightly. "Before those two boys left, they received visitors." Unable to help himself, Izuku concentrated on listening to the conversation. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't have done so, but when he found out that it was his friends they were talking about, he decided to listen. However, knowing that they had left the hospital made him happy and took a weight off his shoulders. All of his friends who had gone to help him were now safe and sound in their homes. "I was busy this morning on another floor. How was it?" "Do you remember the girl with green hair and vines from the sports festival?" Noticing how her companion nodded. "She visited the blonde boy, and as soon as she saw him she patted him on the chest, and when he noticed that she was sobbing he hugged her." Smiling tenderly. "That was very sweet." "Young love, he." Smiling as well. "And the other boy, the redhead, did he also receive a visit from a girl?" "Yes, in fact there were two." Her partner became interested. "The girl who faced that beast of the explosions at the sports festival." Speaking with a stern tone when referring to Bakugo. "She was also very sweet. She brought him a package of sweets to cheer him up. I think they were matchas." "I liked that girl when I saw the festival. Her face seems very cute to me, hee. Pausing briefly. "And who else visited it?" "The other was a tough-looking girl, but she held him by the sleeve of his shirt at all times. Even when he was discharged, she never let go of him." The conversation continued, but by this point Izuku had already left. Whether they were going to start talking about him or not was unimportant. It would be his actions that spoke and would make people trust him again. During his journey he noticed that further ahead there was a half-open door with a light on inside. "Izuku, it seems I'm not the only one unable to sleep." Thinking it was another patient, "I'll be as quiet as possible. I don't want to disturb." Before he could leave, he heard a familiar voice that immediately made him stop, not so much because of who it came from but because of the tone in which he spoke. "Does it hurt here?" Giving him a little kiss in that area. "Mirko, not anymore." "And here?" Repeating the pattern. "Mirko, not there either, thanks to you for Yumi hee." Looking through the small opening in the door, Izuku's eyes opened in great astonishment, seeing his teacher lying down while receiving pampering from that girl, behaving in such a docile manner. Even at all times Mirko's little tail moved with ease. A memory came to his mind. A pending account would be settled. He was grateful that he had brought his phone with him. Without thinking twice he began to record. "Mirko, Fuyumi come," taking her delicately and laying her down next to him, taking the opportunity to use her breasts as pillows. "I appreciate you coming to visit me, but you don't have to pretend any more," caressing her back. "I know you're worried about your father, but don't worry. He'll get out of that state sooner than you can imagine." Looking up to look her in the eyes. "Even I admit it, he's someone very strong," burying his head a little between his partner's breasts, and whispering, "Although not as much as me." "Fuyumi." Yes, hugging her with some force, sinking her further into her breasts. "You're right," starting to caress her head, making her ears move uncontrollably. "After all, we decided that the time had come to tell her about us." Stopping hugging her to see her face, "to tell her that I fell in love with an incredible woman, and that she became my favorite hero." "Mirko." Fuyumi blushes intensely while her ears and tail moved more intensely. She closed her eyes and stretched her lips a little. "Fuyumi, what's wrong, honey? Playing a little joke. Do you want something?" "Mirko, why you know what I want," speaking in an extremely shy tone. "Fuyumi, I'm sorry, but I can't read minds. Her tone became a little more flirtatious. You'll have to tell me what you want. Mirko, I still with eyes closed, but with an even deeper blush. I want a kiss. Fuyumi, you are so adorable. The couple was about to kiss, but before their lips met, Izuku could no longer contain his laughter. Mirko, who's there? Speaking in a very angry tone, you better show yourself or else. Izuku, gee, good evening. Teacher opening the door to not cause more problems. Mirko, don't you know what privacy is? Noticing the phone in his hand, why you? Izuku, sorry, but it's just that smiling. My teacher didn't teach me that. Mirko, now she was nervous, knowing that this was her revenge. You're really going to be bragging now, huh? Izuku, let's make a deal. Showing the phone screen where he had his fleas right on the delete button. I'll delete this video if you do the same with the one you took of me after the fight during the internships. That video where Izuku was in a very compromising situation, sharing the same bed with Shuko and Momo while they were still asleep, and said phrases that were very easy to misinterpret. Mirko, delete that thing now. Izuku, do we have a deal? Mirko, grinding teeth, done. Izuku, very well, pressing the button. Mirko, ha! I'm not deleting that video, brat. Izuku, I just deleted a photo, I'm not going to delete that video. A staring duel had begun, teacher and students who got along quite well despite appearing otherwise. Fuyumi, this? Izuku, I am so sorry. Bowing slightly, I am sorry about all that, I didn't mean to bother you, my name is being interrupted. Fuyumi, I think everyone at this point knows your name. He getting up from the stretcher to shake his hand. My name is Fuyumi Todoroki. I am Shuko's older sister. Izuku was surprised. I've wanted to meet you for a long time, but I didn't think it would be under these circumstances. He with some sweat running down his temple. Izuku, I have to make a good impression, as Shuko did tell me she had an older sister, but scratching head thinking what to say. I didn't think the age difference was that short. Fuyumi, opening eyes, thanks, I'll take that as a compliment. Midoriyuku smiling, you are someone very charming, now I see why my sister always speaks so well of you. They both laughed a little while still holding hands, but an instant later Fuyumi's body was wrapped around her waist by Mirko's arms which, hugging her gently, but firmly at the same time, took her away from her student. Mirko, I taught you my techniques, I gave you the knowledge to do them, but hugging her as if she were a giant stuffed animal I don't plan on giving you. Fuyumi, feeling a lot of jealousy which was obvious to the other two. She's mine. Izuku, I was just being nice. Embarrassed, that wasn't my intention. Mirko, you already have her sister, I won't allow you to include her in that harem. You're. Izuku, I already told you that wasn't my intention. Mirko, haha, you two really get along very well. With eyes closed, but very thoughtful. It's not the first time I've heard about that kind of relationship you have. I won't accept something like that, so I'll put all my effort into helping Shuko keep him all to herself. With Fuyumi's serene voice, teacher and student calmed down, not knowing their deep thoughts. After several minutes they had a small and last pleasant talk. When asked about that necklace, the answer did not please them at all. Mirko assured her that he would investigate about it once he was discharged. It was already very late, and he had to wake up early for what was coming that day. He needed to rest as much as possible. With a slight bow of apologies again for interrupting them, Izuku went to his room where this time he was able to fall asleep. And while he was having a peaceful sleep, in another room another person was having a nightmare. I was a genius! In his room, Katsuki Bakugo was having a dream, in which he was seeing every aspect of his life. Ever since I awakened my quirk, everyone started praising me. His classmates at that time praised him, even his teachers recognized him. I was the strongest of all. For 10 years no one was at my level, I was at the top of my generation. Opening his eyes, Katsuki looked at a vast blue sky. The clouds were dozens of meters below him. All the people his age that he knew were far below his level. Even when I entered the UA, that thought did not change. Yes, they were stronger than average, but in my eyes they were just another group of worthless extras, or so I thought. Standing out above the clouds, various mountains emerged. At the top of each one was one of his companions. At that time he became somewhat nervous, but even so, he was still on the highest mountain. Even with my natural gift, I trained most of my life. I wanted to be the best. No, I had to be the best. I became so obsessed with strength that I began to hate weakness itself. Since he was a child, he was always like this, tormenting others, hitting them, using his quirk on them, on other children who could not defend themselves. Without realizing it, I began to torment people I considered weak. I even began to enjoy it. That desire to feel superior to others only increased as the years went by. Most of all, I always teased him. For a long time, his explosions impacted Izuku's body, causing scars that would never fade. He joined other boys who also loved to bother those they considered weak, and although he never stole his money, he did not stop others from doing so. He only restrained himself so as not to stain his record. I thought there were only two kinds of people in this world, the strong, me, and the weak, him. They were always compared. In sports classes their performances were completely different. While Katsuki received all the attention for his strength and quite worked physique for someone his age, Izuku was the complete opposite, someone weak, too thin that looked like a strong current of wind could have swept him away. So why did you always get up? You never did anything when we bothered you, but you were the first to step in when we bothered someone else. From the beginning he was like that, despite the fear, despite knowing he was weak, despite knowing he had no chance of winning, he stood up again and again. That attitude of yours, I always hated it. And suddenly you changed. The memories of the last time he saw him when they were high school students. After that incident where the strong, Katsuki, was saved by the weak, Izuku, everything changed. He refused to recognize him, but when the next day Almight in person saved him and chose him, he saved him and more importantly he recognized him. We both admire the same hero, but it was you that Almight recognized, and I, seeing him so weak, when he taught us I looked down on him. For Katsuki Bakugo, strength was everything. For someone so thin, without any muscles, he did not deserve to give them heroism classes, where strength was everything. Without realizing it, you became stronger, much stronger than I could have imagined. I refused to accept it, but when I saw that strength of yours for the first time I was afraid. And there, once again, looking at the different mountains in search of the... Where are you? His heartbeat increased its rhythm. I don't see it. A cold sweat ran down his forehead. Where? Looking everywhere, trying to find that mountain where they were, his bad habit of always looking down took its toll once again. Where are you? And suddenly she felt his gaze. A terrifying sensation invaded every cell of her body. An instinctive fear screamed at her not to turn around, but she ignored it. With her body trembling, she slowly turned her face, and she had finally found him. For the first time in his life the roles had been reversed, and it was he who was being looked down upon. Those dull green eyes, where a nascent red light was beginning to shine in his right eye, were watching him with total indifference. The great mountain he stood on and took so much pride in was nothing more than a small slope. It was Izuku who was actually at the top. He was never this strong, one. Katsuki, hhhhhhh. The nightmare was over, the rays of dawn were warmly entering through his window. With tears in his eyes he was breathing with difficulty. His parents, who spent the night by his side, were full of anguish asking him what was wrong, what was hurting him. He didn't respond, he couldn't, he needed a few minutes to understand. He recognized it. There was no way to deny it. This feeling that overwhelmed him was one he had never felt in his entire life. A mixture of regret, fear, remorse and helplessness, the experiment, and recognized for the first time the bitter taste of failure. Mitsuki, honey, call a nurse. Her husband was about to leave, but his son's voice stopped him. Katsuki, Dad? Masaru, Katsuki. Returning to his son's side, carefully taking his hand, please tell us what you have, son. Katsuki, Mom. Mitsuki, here I am, taking him by the other hand with the same delicacy. Katsuki, I am sorry. More tears were shed just like the adults. I'm so sorry. On this day, Katsuki Bakugo is 15 years old. By his own will, I had taken the first step towards improvement. Chapter 28. Because you are part. Izuku, Master. A new day had begun. Izuku, I was finally discharged. In the room of the great hero, who lies unconscious from his deep wounds, was his young successor, wearing a change of clothes that his titular master got him. It did not fit him entirely well since it was not his size, but it was certainly better than the dirty clothes he would have had to wear instead. Izuku, I haven't told this to anyone, not even my sister, Mirko, smiling slightly at Ai-san, the girls, or even my mother before she had to leave. That smile disappeared. I'm only telling this to you, master. A draft of wind came through the window. The warm breeze lightly shook the blinds, caressing her face with its warmth. Izuku, I'm scared. Finally, he confessed. Placing his hand on his master Izuku's thin arm, he stared at his face. His eyes were slightly moist, but he held back his tears. He had already cried a lot again, and he was tired of it. He no longer wanted that stage of his life to be repeated. Izuku, don't get me wrong. I don't regret my decision, nor will I pretend that what happened several days ago never happened. It's just that his hand trembled slightly. I feel a great pressure on my shoulders right now. The trembling of his hand stopped as he pulled it away from his master's arm. Izuku, you're in front of me, but I miss you too much. Staying silent for a few seconds. If gods exist, I pray that you wake up soon. I still don't feel like I'm ready to face the world without your guidance, and yet The light of the bright dawn continued to shine brightly outside the window. Several people could be heard talking at the hospital door, but they were too far away to understand what they were saying. Izuku, I will follow all your teachings. A memory passed through his mind, the words spoken by the great hero, after seeing himself in the hospital after the victory against the Nomu in the Usch. You were scared, right? At that moment, in that battle, he was really afraid. He even thought that he would die, that he would break all his promises, that he would disappoint all those who trusted him. But it didn't happen. In his moment of greatest need, the one for all was at his side, the first time he heard the voice of the first bearer. True courage is not in never being afraid, it is in facing fear and doing the right thing. I could never forget those words, that's why. Izuku, I will continue moving forward, doing what I consider right for myself, by my own will. I promise I will not let you down. Her hands went to her lips, leaving behind the sadness, and forming with them a very characteristic smile that more than one would remember. Because I am. First of all, what that boy was experiencing was nothing more than a fake smile. Yes, he was determined, he would follow his own path, he did not regret anything, he would show people what he really is again. He was more motivated than ever to continue training, master his power, and be the hero he so longs to be. But still that smile was fake, and as sweet as it is, a lie is still a lie. Guard, time's up. Knocking on the door. You have to leave now, boy. Both Aizawa and Star had to leave to deal with various matters at the academy, but not before his sworn sister told him that his request had been accepted, but that unfortunately she would not be able to accompany him on this occasion. Izuku, I'm leaving now, master. Looking at his face for the last time. I will try to visit you as many times as I can. With one last solitary tear rolling down his cheek, Izuku walked to the door and opened it. Izuku, thank you very much for letting me say goodbye to him. Guard, don't even mention it, it's the least I could do for you. The only guard assigned to him didn't look at him with contempt or fear. He saw him as he really was, just a normal boy who wanted to do the right thing. Guard, maybe you don't know, but one of the people who saved you in the island incident was my sister. Causing Izuku to open his eyes slightly in surprise. I was on vacation with my little niece, and if it weren't for you, who knows what would have happened to them. Bowing slightly. Thank you very much for saving them. A slight grimace formed on his lips, curving ever so slightly upwards. Guard, and I hope you'll forgive me for this. Stopping. Bowing to then take out some handcuffs. I have orders to put them on you. They say it's for security reasons, but His hands were shaking. This was not right, and he knew it. For his part, Izuku, with his mind clearer than the day before, began to notice the irregularities in the words of Director Nezu. Guard, Izuku, it's okay. Stretching his hands. Don't worry, you're just doing your job. Without putting up the slightest resistance, Izuku let himself be handcuffed. Not that he could have resisted in the first place. The collar tied to his neck prevented it. The guard kept saying, I'm sorry, as he placed them on him, making sure they weren't too tight or causing any more discomfort than necessary. Hospital entrance? Reporter, here it comes. Warning who was approaching. A multitude of flashing lights from multiple cameras began to photograph Izuku, focusing on both that collar and those handcuffs. Reporter, Izuku Midoriya. Approaching shamelessly without the other guards doing anything. Have you already considered giving the one for all to a professional hero? Reporter, are you going to give it to Kamui Woods as compensation for your grandfather stealing it from him? Reporter, will you apologize to all the families whose children were kidnapped and turned into nomas by your grandfather? Reporter, when will you give back their quirks to the two heroes Ragdoll and Pixie Bob? Endless questions, endless unfounded statements. In this sea of reporters, the guard who had handcuffed him was the only one who genuinely tried to pull his prey away from the young boy. Using all his effort, he had managed to get him to the police patrol that was waiting for them. Once inside, the door closed. Inside there was another different guard, but the one I didn't expect to find was Nezu. I'm very sorry about all this. Young Midoriya staring at him. It seems that some member of this hospital leaked your departure to the press. Speaking in a calm tone, I assure you that disciplinary sanctions will be taken against the person responsible once he is found. The camera lights kept illuminating their faces, Nezu holding back his laughter, not expecting him to respond. Izuku, Director Nezu staring him straight in the eyes. You should improve the security issue. It's not the first time that information has been leaked to you. At that answer with that tone, the director opened his eyes a little. He was genuinely excited. If everything was so easy for him, it wouldn't be fun. How arrogant he was. Guard, hey! Angry, what are you implying? Nezu, no, it's okay. Stopping him. Young Midoriya is right. We must improve our security system. His gaze moves to those handcuffs. By the way, take them off. Guard, what? Opening his eyes in shock, but the Nezu, young Midoriya has not committed any crime. That is why he does not have to wear that. Looking at him sideways in such a way that it made him nervous. I gave you an order, obey. Guard, why yes. Following the instructions given, the man took out the key to the chains and proceeded to take them off. Izuku just watched the process without realizing that while he looked away, Nezu had pressed a button on the patrol car door so that nothing inside would be visible. In the eyes of the people, Izuku was still handcuffed. Nezu, I'm sorry about this incident. Young man pretending to be worried. I wish I could do the same with the necklace you're wearing, but unfortunately my authority doesn't reach that high. Once the handcuffs were removed, the patrol began to move, thus beginning its long journey. Izuku, don't worry, Director Nezu, it's just a little annoying, but when I prove that I'm not like him, they'll take it away from me. Nezu, I will advocate for you when that time comes. With their eyes locked on each other, the game had begun. One wanted to gain the other's trust. The other party looked for reasons to distrust, but for the moment they wouldn't say anything. After all, they had nowhere to go, and they didn't want to be separated from their friends. Nezu, it's going to be a long one, so make yourself comfortable looking out the window. Do you want to stop for a drink? Izuku, I'm fine with this, also looking out the window, but I appreciate the offer. The journey continued in a deathly silence, full of discomfort for the guard who was at his side. At one point the route took a detour, which was very noticeable. Izuku, aren't we taking the highway? Nezu, it's just a small detour. Young man playing it down. Many debris from his last blow flew in all directions and damaged various roads kilometers away from the center of the battle. Within minutes the patrol had climbed a slope, also that the destruction left by the war was visible in the distance. Entire buildings split in half, multiple cranes lifting the rubble, no longer to find survivors but their lifeless bodies due to all the tons of concrete that fell on them. Guard, in all my years of service, I have never seen such destruction as this time. Those monsters really destroyed everything in their path. I comment without measuring my words in the least. Nezu, it's natural. Looking sideways at Izuku and then looking at the desolate landscape. Uncontrolled power only causes tragedies. That had been a clear hint that Izuku immediately understood, but a part of him could not say otherwise. That was true. He had seen it many times on the internet. Almight, even with his great power, always held back, making sure to never damage the infrastructure more than necessary, and only when he was sure that all civilians had been evacuated. For the rest of the trip everyone remained silent, but he was not spared from furtive glances from time to time. Maximum security prison, Tartarus. Izuku amazing. The boy was amazed and genuinely impressed by the building in front of him. Walls that looked incredibly strong, multiple weapons located on the roof, and the large number of guards guarding the entire perimeter. It was just as his reputation warranted. Right now he was in the highest security prison in the country. The place where they lock up the worst criminals, the place where the Izuku. There are many guards noticing everyone's gaze on him. One has wings. I assume he must watch the perimeter from the sky. Another has characteristics. His bad habit added to his curiosity about the quirks of others came to the surface once again, superficially analyzing the quirks of the different guards. Their looks were astonished along with nervousness, implying that he was getting pretty close to what they could do, and what their functions were in the prison. Nezu, I don't want to interrupt you, young man, but they didn't give you much time for this visit, stopping him from continuing to analyze. I recommend that you hurry up and enter. Izuku, why yes, starting to walk, I'm sorry. The doors opened, the screech of the heavy metal doors was deafening. Along the way only the director Nezu accompanied him, walking side by side. Izuku, is it over there? Pointing to a hallway where he had a plaque with the word visitor on it. Nezu, I'm sorry young man, but we can't go through that hallway. Continuing forward, being followed by Izuku. Improvements are constantly being made to the prison, and the hallway where visitors pass through is under maintenance. Izuku, but what about the visits that some inmates had? Nezu, they were rescheduled for another day. Big doors began to open just because Star asked for this favor. Was that an exception was made with you? Although for this occasion we will have to take this other path. Hiding his smile, I hope this is not too much for you, young man. Izuku, huh? Confused, what does that mean? There was no need to respond. Once the large doors opened, Izuku could see that he was at the doors of an entire ward of prisoners who, upon noticing him, immediately burst into screams. Who is that kid? Fresh meat. But look who we have here. I know him. Before they locked me up, his face became famous. Do we have a star among us? Many did not know him. It was not that information from the outside world was abundant in that place for criminals, but many others did know him. Well done fooling all those idiots, lol. When are you going to free us? You're coming to see him, aren't you? You belong here. After all, you are his grandson, ha ha ha. The screams did not stop. The looks of all those criminals on his shoulders made him feel very uncomfortable, which increased as some depraved people raised their voices. Hey kid, you have a nice butt. Why don't you come closer for a moment? We promise we'll treat you nicely, haha. I like kids like you. Disgusting. Let's love each other together, touching each other, kissing each other, enjoying each other's aroma while we hug each other a lot without ever letting go. Disgusting. Here locked in this cell, on the bed, loving each other until the limits of our bodies disappear, becoming one. Disgusting. Disgusting. With our souls intertwined, carving our love into each other, sharing that great feeling between us all. Disgusting. 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 Nezu, we're here, young man. It's this way. Noticing Izuku's discomfort, I'll ask that when we leave we go through a quieter hallway. Izuku, thank you. An unpleasant feeling of disgust passed through Izuku's entire body. He had never felt such depravity in his life. His hands trembled a little as he walked. The director noticed that detail and smiled to himself. The visitor hallway was never maintained to begin with. They made him walk next to those cells for fun forever. Guest room. Nezu, it's here, young man, in front of a large door that began to open slowly. I remind you that you don't have much time. Izuku began to walk slowly towards the room. I'll be waiting for you in this place, young man. Good luck. White. It was the color that dominated the whole place. There was no object in the room except for a small chair placed right in front of a large, impenetrable glass. And on the other side is the strapped tightly into a chair, connected to many sensors, with guns in every corner pointed at him at all times. With a light sigh, he walked in complete silence and finally sat down on the chair. Grandfather and grandson were once again face to face. AFO, This place is so stiff smiling even if I have an itch on my back and I want to scratch it by rubbing myself with this chair. All the guns in the room start pointing directly at my head. With a calm tone he began to speak. AFO, vital signs, brain waves, the slightest activation of a quirk, it is constantly being monitored, and if it activates even one, they will immediately pull the trigger. His breathing was as calm as his tone. AFO, being a prisoner of an underground prison located deep inside, covered with so many security measures, it's no wonder they named this place like that. Haha, not stopping talking, they made this prison based on a Greek legend. Tartarus, raising his face slightly, is the name of the god of the underworld. Those who betray the gods, who rule over this world, must go through a hell like this. Observation room. Warden, I still can't believe they authorized this. Hero Commission Director, it's a small price to pay to get something better. Warden, what do you mean? Nezu, Star and Stripe. Arriving at the room, Director Nezu found himself next to the director of the Hero Commission, both with their false smiles towards each other. They were nothing more than allies out of pure convenience. They knew that they could never trust each other. Warden, just because she asked for this, they grant it to her so easily? I ask in an angry tone. Nezu, of course not, shaking his paw, she is just a foreigner with no authority in this country. Director of the Commission, but if we allow these two to talk, she agreed to stay in this city for a while. Nezu, Almight and Endeavor are still unconscious, the latter even lost an arm. There was no way to reimplant it. The bull-like monster that caused so much fear to people with its mere image had not only torn it out, but it had taken a huge bite out of it, swallowing a large portion of its flesh. Commission Director, not to mention that many more heroes are still recovering from their injuries. Some were so serious that they will never be able to return to service, like Kemui. Nezu, Star's presence isn't as relentless as All Might once had, but it's more than enough to keep some guys at bay. But anyway, let's leave this talk and continue watching the screens. The warden had to endure the awkward silence that filled the room after they stopped talking. Both Nezu and the commission director did not look away for even a second from the conversation that was taking place just one room away. Guest room. AFO, I'm sorry for talking so much. I didn't expect to receive any visitors so soon. His smile widened. But tell me, whoever you are, what do you think of what I just said? Unable to use any of his many quirks, the great villain found himself completely submerged in darkness, unable to see anything, unable to feel anything but the strong hold of the chains that held him to his own, hearing nothing but the sound of the weapons always moving to aim directly at his head. Izuku, I don't know much about it. AFO's smile disappeared when he recognized his voice. In elementary and high school they didn't teach us much about the past, from that time before quirks existed. AFO, Izuku? A deathly silence had formed. Ha 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 ha, I never thought our reunion would be so soon. Ha ha ha. A new smile had formed on the man's lips, and Izuku instantly recognized it. It was a smile he had seen many times in his life, whether from other people boasting that they would help him or even himself many times in the mirror. A fake smile. Izuku, you don't want to talk to me? AFO, no, it's nothing like that. Sighing while again taking on a calm tone, it's just that I didn't expect this. His smile became somewhat mocking. With All Might falling unconscious, I didn't know who could have come to visit me. Izuku, how do you? AFO, you'd be surprised how much can be heard behind these walls. Their security in the transmission of information leaves much to be desired. With those words, both the warden and the head of the commission became angry. They would investigate who had given him that information in order to punish him severely. Meanwhile, Nezu just laughed shamelessly at them. AFO, they dream of having absolute control over everything, but they will never get it, not over information, not over me, and most importantly over you. Izuku, control over me, huh? AFO, huh? Confused, why did your tone suddenly change? Immediately the alarms began to sound. The multiple weapons that were pointed at All for One began to emit a small but audible clip, as the safety catch that had been removed, and they were ready to fire. Izuku, what are you doing? Suddenly getting up from the chair, throwing it to the floor. What are you doing? Hitting the glass that separated them with a blow that hurt his hand. AFO, I see, so that's it. The alarm stopped. The weapons returned to their initial position, and without them knowing it, the heavily armed guards never entered the rooms. Izuku, what did you do? AFO. I activated a single perception quirk. Izuku was impressed. I wanted to know what caused the change in your tone. How funny, moving his face a little upwards, calculating the position of his grandson's face. It seems that we both have some straps on. Izuku stared at his grandfather. His heart began to beat faster, a slight drop of sweat running down his temple. AFO, nothing lasts forever. His words were spoken in a tone of great seriousness. These chains upon us will one day be removed. Izuku, we can never be caged for long, by anything, or by anyone. His heart rate increased. The tension generated by All for One was really intense. Even the people in the adjoining rooms became nervous. AFO, Izuku, we are free. Widening his smile again, our birth quirk appears to be non-existent, where many can create fire, ice, move objects with their minds, destroy everything they touch from a very young age. We do not realize our true power until we take someone else's. The boy at that moment clenched his fists with increasing force. He wanted to hate him. His initial purpose for this meeting was to tell him how much he detested everything he represented. He planned to shout in his face that would show that he would never be like him. That he would be a better person. I couldn't. As much as he wanted to hate him for stealing his original quirk, there wasn't even an ounce of hate in his heart. He was his grandfather after all, the last link to his father whom he loved and admired so much, much more than Almight. AFO. We were born with nothing because we have the ability to achieve everything in this world. Those words Izuku would never forget. They would be engraved in his heart, in the deepest part of his soul. AFO, what do you think about it, Izuku? I asked him at the same time that his attitude returned to normal. The immense pressure that his seriousness transmitted disappeared. Those last words were not only directed towards his grandson, but also towards the people who he fully knew were watching and listening to them at all times. Izuku, shut up. AFO, huh? Raising an eyebrow. With a somewhat heavy sigh, the young man lifted the chair that he had thrown to the floor, and then sat in the same initial position. Izuku, I asked to come talk to you, just to listen to you talk, pretending to be calm, although deep down he was still a little nervous. Why are you doing all this? Was what you said about my father true, or just another one of your countless lies that you always tell people? The big villain remained silent for a few seconds. His smile had not disappeared, but it had certainly reduced in intensity. AFO, you want to get straight to the point, huh? Lowering his gaze a little, I won't deny that I'm a liar and a great manipulator, but I assure you that nothing I've told you is a lie, although for the moment I can't tell you more things about Hisashi. Izuku glanced at the camera located in one of the corners of the ceiling. Something told him that there was something more important behind that information, and holding back his desire to know the truth, he continued speaking. Izuku, and the other thing? Somewhat irritated for not getting an answer, why did you ruin so many lives? Clenching his fists, with all your resources you could have saved many people. If only you had chosen a different path, maybe you would have been a hero. AFO, you're wrong, interrupting him before he finished that sentence. A distant memory, a burned book, a story about a fool instead of a clown, that story that always tormented the conscience of All for One. Now he was irritated. AFO, Izuku, heroes don't exist. The image of his brother's face passed through his mind. Those heroes, who did good for the sake of it being the right thing to do, no longer exist. You said it yourself during that sports festival, remembering those words of his grandson when he faced off against Endeavor's daughter. The closest to a true one was All Might, and even though I hate him, I must admit that I always respected him for that. Izuku, he is someone incredible. Smiling slightly, his image alone inspired many, an entire generation that wants to be like him, including me. Placing his hand gently on the glass, managing to see half of his reflection in it while the other half was his grandfather's face. Those heroes that you say no longer exist will soon arrive. His friends, the people who accepted him despite the teacher's incident, Izuku had seen it. They gave their best to improve. Kirishima's determination, Kaminari's bravery, recognizing his mistakes and correcting them from Mineta. Supporting others like Momo does, opening your heart to new friends like Shuko, and contributing with new innovative ideas like Melissa. And those were just a few examples. One day more and more young heroes will walk by their side, hoping that everyone will adopt that ideal to reach. Involuntarily, he smiled genuinely as he remembered those faces, especially those of those 3 girls who accepted him despite knowing the whole truth, those girls who would have to give him an answer and clarify his emotions as soon as he saw them again. AFO, if you are referring to your colleagues at the academy, then you are wrong. As if reading his mind, All for One brought him out of his thoughts. His tone was direct, not mocking at all. He spoke with the most crushing of truths. AFO, did you forget your confrontation with the teachers? Both Izuku and Director Nezu opened their eyes in shock. If they are the true heroes, who will soon arrive, then why did none of them go to help you when they were beating you like that? Even though everyone was watching, none of them dared to take a single step forward. Izuku, how did you? AFO, the security at that academy is disgusting. It wasn't very difficult to get the security recordings. Does that rat spend the budget on imported cheese? A clear mockery of the Nezu director, who clenched his fists tightly, while now he was the one who had to hold back the laughter of both the warden and the director of the commission. AFO, returning to the topic of your classmates getting Izuku's attention since it was an exam, none of them wanted to intervene for fear of harming their final ranking. Their features changed slightly to one that was difficult to decipher. In the end, they only cared about their own well-being. The academy entrance exam was really difficult and unfair. Not only in the academic subject but in the practical test against the robots. Shinso was the irrefutable proof of that unfair test, where people with quirks that are not offensive would hardly get any points by defeating them. That was where the great fear came from when Aizawa threatened to expel them in the ball toss game on their first day. They had all worked hard for months studying and training their bodies hard. Izuku himself went through the same thing. Izuku, that may be true, but still they wanting to defend them. But AFO interrupts him while surprising him again. AFO, still, they did the right thing. They worked hard to get into the academy, to make a career out of being a hero, either because of family tradition or because of the profits that job generates. Anyone would have thought twice before doing something knowing that they could be expelled. Contractions after contradictions. Did this man ever come to hate the concept of heroes? AFO, answer me something. Izuku, what do you want to achieve as a hero? That question had been asked to him several times. Inevitably, he remembered when he faced Stain during the internships with Mirko and Gran Torino, that fight in an alley to save Ida from the edge of the assassin's sword. It was there that for the first time the world learned of the longing and the ideal that, as impossible as it may seem, he wants to achieve one day. Izuku, what do I want to achieve? A slight grimace formed on his lips. A fair world, he declared. I can't save all the people in the world. I know that perfectly well, clenching his fists, but if I manage to save those within my reach and those people do the same, then no one else would have to suffer. A world where no one has to cry, a world where parents can always be with their children. That last sentence had caused a strong impact on All for One's heart. How long had it been since he saw his son smile? Did he still remember it perfectly? He was terrified of forgetting the small details of all the important people he left behind. AFO, what a silly, childish dream, and at the same time very beautiful. His tone became somewhat melancholic. But you know it's impossible, don't you? Although I would love for a world like that to exist. Izuku, I know, and I don't care. Closing my eyes for a few seconds, I will continue trying to fulfill my ideal, even if I have to sacrifice myself to achieve it. AFO, you inherited Hisashi's kindness and hers. A smile with a touch of sadness formed on her lips. I respect it, and genuinely appreciate that dream you have. But with a firmer attitude she spoke, that way of thinking is very idealistic, and in the end you will only harm the people who love you. Izuku, what do you mean? Confused. AFO, heroism is not equal to lack of self-love. At those first words, Izuku felt as if he had been hit directly in the heart. AFO, people have value just for being people and living their lives with dignity. If you only sacrifice yourself for others as an excuse to fill a void that only exists inside your head, you will end up harming the loved ones with whom you have forged true bonds. Izuku, why? Bringing his hand to his chest, why are you saying those words to me? AFO, because I don't want you to suffer. His tone was calm, full of something strange in him. Love, I was there the day you were born. I lifted you in my arms while I chose your name. I cried with joy as soon as you held my finger with your little hands. Izuku's eyes began to moisten at those words and at that feeling he was beginning to feel in his heart. AFO, I genuinely love you, and that is why I tell you these words, so that you do not make a serious mistake, even if I do not deserve to give them to you. My love as a grandfather forces me to do so. A message was broadcast over the loudspeakers and said, "There are less than 3 minutes left." But no one paid attention to it, or rather, ignored it. AFO, not everyone in this world can be heroes. Clenching his fists as best he could, whether it's because of their not at all striking quirk, their appearance, or even their origins, all of that influences when it comes to letting someone into that world. His academy partner who he fought with during the sports festival came to mind. Shinso thought he remembered his name. His quirk of manipulating minds was truly incredible, capable of ending many fights before they even began. And yet he had been sent to the General Studies Department. AFO, over the years, some people who committed crimes and paid for them reformed, regretting their wrongdoings, wanting to make up for their mistakes, helping to protect society, longing to belong to it. What do you think happened? Pausing for a moment, naturally, that opportunity was denied to them because of the bad image that the Commission of Heroes would have. Izuku opened his eyes slightly, while the head of the commission gave the signal to the warden to have his men enter as soon as possible, not caring that the visiting time was not over yet. AFO, the same thing happens with civilians who want to help other people in trouble using their quirks. Yes, some lack the experience to use them and end up harming the situation, but many others do succeed, inspired by the heroes, wanting to follow their example and help whoever needs it without asking for anything in return. Just for doing the right thing. His tone had once again become serious. Tell me, what do you think happens to those people? The young boy clenched his fist slightly. He knew the answer to that question. How could you not know? If he went through the same thing a few months ago, right on the day he met Almight. AFO, you already know that, don't you? Laughing lightly, those people who jump into action with the sole motive of helping someone in need only receive a large fine. Instead of congratulating their good deed, they only get punished. Sighing, there have been many cases where the companies they worked for fired them once the incident became public. Unfair. That was a great injustice. In a society full of heroes, is it wrong to follow their example? AFO, since when did helping others become a crime? That person that everyone said was a monster, at this moment, in the eyes of his grandson, he looked very human. Much more than most. AFO, do you remember what happened to you? Listening to the multiple doors in the room begin to open that day where you acted and saved your companion, naming him with great contempt. No hero present did anything. Only you had the genuine courage to step forward and face the situation. That day was very present in Izuku's memories. It was a day he would never forget. AFO, and how did they reward you for your actions? Smiling by congratulating you? By recognizing your worth? Izuku, no, his gaze became serious, as did his tone as he stared at his grandfather. The only thing they said to me that day were complaints, scoldings, and criticism. He never expected to receive words of congratulations, or so he thought. Even Bakugo himself, when looking for him, only yelled at him angrily, telling him that he never needed his help to begin with. Yes, Izuku never expected anything in return for his actions. It was his own body that reacted on its own to help, but the truth is that he would have liked to have heard a simple, thank you. AFO, Izuku, some jobs only work with people suffering, knowing that these would be his last moments with his grandson in a long time. Funeral homes profit from death. Doctors need people to get sick to receive their payment and feed their families. Understanding what he meant, Izuku and all for one began to hear the voices of the guards about to enter the room. AFO, heroes need crime and villains to exist. Even heroes lie when they say they dream of a world without crime. His smile became arrogant as always. How could they continue to maintain their position? Letting out a light laugh. Why do you think that despite there being so many heroes, there is still organized crime? Ha, because that's what they. A loud scream was heard over the speakers. It was the director of the commission, ordering them to stop talking because the visit was over. At the same time that heavily armed guards entered the room, 2 of them on Izuku's side and the other 6 on all for one's side, pointing their guns at him while they removed the safety locks from his chair and then took him back to his cell. Guard, very well, boy, holding him by the arm. It's time for you to go, smiling maliciously, or do you want to keep him company in a cell next to him? Izuku, that won't happen, forcefully pulling his arm away so he would let go. Guard, don't get aggressive, kid, or else I'm about to say a few words, but I'm interrupted. AFO, when I get out of here. Everyone present felt a chill run down their spines, cold sweat fell on their temples, the guards pointed their weapons, but they could not hide the trembling of their hands, all under the immense pressure exerted by that man. AFO, you will be the first one I take care of, haha. The guard next to Izuku began to tremble with much more nervousness in his being. Izuku, let me tell you a few last words. Taking advantage of the slowness with which the locks on his chair were being removed, the great villain spoke one last time. AFO, you can curse me for everything I put you through by stealing your quirk. Safeties had almost been removed. Allow me to ignore my failure to protect you and let me give you this last piece of advice. For Izuku, it was as if they were alone in that room, with no one around them, and no large glass separating them. Grandfather and grandson were simply standing face to face, talking as equals. AFO, come out of your shell, reject the help of others and face your own adventure. The only direction you need to look is forward. It's okay to be selfish, after all, everyone is to some extent, only then can you avoid being hurt again. Or are you even capable of forgiving all the people who hurt you so much? One last clip brought back the sound of the other people in the room. The locks had been completely removed, and with that they slowly began to take all for one back to his cell. While that was happening, Izuku remained silent, with a light sigh. All for one understood that his grandson would not answer him. It was a pity, but he had no choice but to resign himself. The mere fact of having had the opportunity to see each other again and being able to say a few words to him was much more than he thought. Izuku, to everyone's surprise he bowed slightly. I thank you for the food you prepared a few days ago for me. All for one was surprised, and I'm very sorry for having wasted it. My father taught me to never waste food. Izuku, raising his head, all his teachings continue to live in my heart. Turning around, I will follow my own path, but I will never forget his teachings, nor those of my teachers, nor yours either. Starting to walk towards the exit on his own, he had many things on his mind now. There were big doubts still lurking in his mind, doubts that he would not stop looking for an answer to. At all costs. AFO, ha 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 ha, being led towards the door as well. I never expected that answer. Speaking in a louder voice, sensing that Izuku had already left the room, but it's not surprising, after all you are. The doors closed before that last sentence could be heard. Upon reaching the hallway again, Izuku had found Director Nezu, who, just as he had told him, had been waiting for him there. Or so he wanted me to think. Nezu, are you okay, young man? Pretending to be worried. Izuku, I want to get out of this prison. Nezu, I understand. Turning around to start walking through another exit than the one they came from before I managed to get them to authorize our exit through this other path. It is completely quiet. Both walked in complete silence. Noticing Izuku, who was very thoughtful, young Midoriya, I know that everything that is happening to you is very hard for you, and believe me, I want to help you as much as I can. Smiling falsely, while you were still in the hospital, I took the trouble to send your belongings to your bedroom. Getting ahead of Izuku, who was beginning to walk slower, do not worry. I personally asked that they be very careful with your things. When we return to the academy, you can distract yourself with your notebooks. A nice gesture, if only there were no intentions behind it. Izuku, thank you very much, Director Nezu, for everything. Nezu, no need, young man. As director of the academy, I care about the well-being of all my students, and that includes you. Izuku looked at the director's back as one of his grandfather's words echoed in his mind. Even heroes lie. Izuku, I never told him about my notebooks. Intertwining their eyes, they both remained in a deep silence, as deep as an immense abyss. Nezu, finally this is over. Managing to see a group of cells. Now that we allow this, Star will stay in this country for a while. Smiling, her foolish duty and pride as a hero will make her unable to fulfill the deal. Arriving at the group of cells passing by their side, that it is in the academy is an inconvenience. But I just have to be more careful from now on. Various plans began to form in his mind, as they walked through the hallway that they had previously entered when the director saw the same cell that he had felt when he entered. The cell of a specific woman, one whose skills were highly valued even today and who with the right motivation could serve their plans. That was how both Izuku and Director Nezu left behind that group of cells in complete silence, those cells in which one had the name of who was locked up there. Kana Tsutsumi, Lady Nagant. UA Academy Dormitories. Izuku, I finally arrived. In front of the large building where his classmates were, Izuku was staring at him. It had already gotten dark a long time ago. The reason for his delay was because of all the time they made him waste, both on his way out of the hospital, the detour from the route to Tartarus, the time he spent talking to his grandfather, and again the same detour back to the academy. All of that took up a lot of time during the day. With a heavy sigh, Izuku approached the entrance of the bedroom. Even though he knew he wouldn't stay there, he wanted to see his friends. And before reaching for the doorknob, he heard them. Mina, Kirishima, thank you so much again for inviting us to dinner tonight. Taking another bite to her mouth, this barbecue is delicious. Kendo, they were even kind enough to invite us, bowing slightly, thank you very much. Kirishima, it's nothing, downplaying it, we went through a lot of things at that camp, so I thought it would be a good idea to have this nice moment. Kaminari, I believe it, man, after thinking that I was going to die, enjoying this moment of peace is really good, feeling something getting tangled around his wrist. What's wrong, Shiozaki-san? Getting nervous, his cheeks flushed just like the girl, who tried to look him straight in the eyes, but her shyness made her look away, but she still maintained her delicate grip. Ibara, it's so turning redder. But her friends encouraged her from their seats. It's so you don't do something as dangerous as that again, releasing her grip. I am sorry, She tried to pull away, but her hand was held at the last moment by Kaminari. Both of them at that moment thought, his hand is so warm. Kaminari, I can't guarantee that I won't be in danger again, but gathering all the courage in his body, if you're waiting for me, I'll do everything possible to come back. The grip of his hands increased, even subtly interlacing his fingers, and even less so if I owe you a date, Shiozaki-san. The girl's heart was beating fast. She could even swear on the name of her faith that at any moment it would burst out of her chest due to the great pressure he exerted. She was happy, genuinely happy, and following the boy's example of bravery, she spoke. Ibara, can you call me by my name? Gulping as small flowers bloomed in her hair. Denki-san. Kaminari, that blushes a lot, but keeping a big smile, it would be an honor, Ibara-san. Both Mina and Setsuna wrote in their respective notebooks about the great progress of their two companions. Apparently they had many more things in common than they thought. Mina, by the way, looking at Setsuna, isn't that Monoma guy very quiet? Knowing how he is, he would start yelling. Setsuna, don't worry about it, playing it down, our president knocked him out and tied him up before coming here, smiling at how fun it was to see that scene. He stayed in our dorms with the boring aways who didn't want to come, pointing towards some people. Hey, look what's going on over there. Directing their gaze in the indicated direction, both of them opened their notebooks again, although Mina still had a very great internal conflict because of what she saw. Uraraka, Kirishima-kun, slightly blushing. Thank you very much for inviting us to the meal. Kirishima, I already said it wasn't a problem, Uraraka-san. Smiling at her, more importantly taking the plate of food and raising it towards her direction. Do you want more? Eat all you want. Uraraka, and no, I'm fine like this, shaking her head. I've already eaten a lot, and it wouldn't be good to take advantage of your generosity. Besides, I'm not hungry anymore. Her stomach starting to growl, which made her as red as the boy's hair. Kirishima, Uraraka-san getting a little serious, but still with a warm smile on his lips. I invited this meal because I felt like doing it, so that we could all enjoy this little celebration. You eating another dish wouldn't be taking advantage of me, scratching his cheek, although in fact, and if I'm honest with you, I chose that restaurant partly because of you. Uraraka, for me? Blushes a little more if possible. Kirishima, yes, I know how much you enjoy eating. I could see it during the camp. I saw how you enjoyed the food we prepared together. Looking her straight in the eyes, you always have a nice smile when you eat something you like. That's why I ordered at that restaurant, so you can eat everything you want and have that beautiful smile. The girl lowered her head, her hair covering her face, leaving only her ears in full view, which were bright red from her immense blush. Kirishima, by the way, don't tell anyone, but lowering his voice, I got 3 free desserts on sale that I hid in the refrigerator. One of them is mochi. I was thinking of sharing the other one with Jiro. But don't tell anyone else, haha. With those words, the boy now left to talk to his aforementioned partner, leaving behind Uraraka, who did not look up, saying some words that no one could hear. I don't deserve it, said Suna, ignorant of what was happening to her classmate. Wow, there are a lot of Casanovas in her class, don't you think? Haha. Mina, hee. She could only laugh as she wrote in her notebooks, seeing how Jiro was now the one blushing, not noticing a small pressure in her chest was beginning to build. Hagakure, Shield-san, so now you're staying with us too? Melissa, yes, with a plate of food in her hand. Even if I am in the support department, I was assigned a room with you, smiling, and I have already told you, but you can just call me Melissa. Shuko, isn't that strange? Melissa, maybe, but I'm not complaining, pretending to be sad. Don't you like me being here with you? Ouch, complaining when she receives a light blow to the head from her friend. Shuko, you know I don't mean that, turning her face while pouting slightly and whispering, I don't mind spending time with you, silly. Even though those words were spoken in whispers, Melissa could hear them and was very happy about that. Compared to her initial attitude towards her, it was a big change. Yes, they annoyed each other from time to time, but deep down they considered each other great friends. Hagakure, by the way, girls, you who are from important families, what do you think of these dormitories? Shuko, they're fine, I guess. Melissa, they are nice, although somewhat small. I don't have much space in my room to store my projects. Shuko, true, they are somewhat small. Remembering a detail now that I remember, the room alone is the size of the closet in Momo's room. A drop of sweat ran down Harakure's temple. Those rooms were bigger than the ones she had at home, and for both of them they were small. Even worse, in Yayorosa's case, knowing that, and for the sake of her emotional stability, she preferred to change the subject. Kendo, by the way, Yayorosa-san in another part of the room sitting with her partner. Is it true that Bakugo was taken out of the hero department? Momo, yes, I received the notification this morning. Aizawa-sensei told me that they had already selected someone to fill his vacant position, but he didn't tell me who it was. Kendo, you're so lucky, letting out a heavy sigh. You got rid of one of those troublesome kids. Getting depressed. I still have to deal with Monoma and always realizing who he mentioned. I'm sorry, Momo, don't worry, it's not your fault for his attitude. Sighing, anyway, we really are unlucky to have to deal with those idiots. She spoke while looking sideways at Ida, who was eating in complete silence and away from the others. But let's stop talking about those things. This is a celebration, right? Kendo, that's true, again having a better mood. Hey, can I ask you a question? Momo, you already did it, hee. Kendo, ha ha, very funny, speaking with irony. Momo, sorry, some of Izuku's humor rubbed off on me, hee. Kendo, actually, I wanted to ask you about him. A silence formed between them. What would she ask him? Would she also say that he was a threat? Would she say that it was better to keep him away from all his companions? She didn't know, but whatever her question was, she would defend him. Kendo, coming closer to whisper, is it true that you and Midoriya have a secret relationship? Momo, huh? Almost dropping the plate of food in shock, attracting some glances. Why are you asking that? Kendo, well, putting her index fingers together while blushing, I recently saw a video of you saying that you shared a bed with Midoriya along with Todoroki. Somewhat embarrassed, and since you're the closest to him for the longest time, well, I thought that. As if a bucket of cold water had fallen on her, Momo suddenly remembered her words during the party on the island. On that occasion, and because of the alcohol she had accidentally drank, she had said such words so out of context. Momo, I said those words just because I accidentally drank some alcohol. Covering her face with her hands, that whole thing was a big misunderstanding. While Momo explained better what had happened, Sato had arrived at the main room with 2 large cakes that he himself had baked in his room. Everyone celebrated the arrival of the dessert. Everyone was happy. Everyone was united. Even those who were divided by this occasion came together. Once again the class was united, not even better than before, as the class was by their side sharing pleasant moments. They were still 15-year-old children. An important part of their development is spending time with friends. And while everyone was happily celebrating and sharing the slices of cake, Izuku was silent on the other side of the door, surrounded by the cold night, where the clouds covered most of the stars. Izuku, I can't do this to them. Izuku, I better retire to my own bedroom. Slowly walking away from the door, the young boy walked in complete silence, passing by a window, glancing inside the room briefly, seeing everyone with big smiles on their lips. Nobody noticed, or so I thought. Izuku, the class is once again unique, negotiating with himself, even though I am still the vice president of the class and my duty is to look after the good of all, looking at his new home from a distance. If I enter now again, two sides will be created. That is inevitable, but at least I would like for one night they to be united as in the beginning. Arriving at the bedroom where he would stay, he had inserted the key that Director Nezu had given him before leaving. Upon entering and turning on the light, he saw the entire place. It was not as small as he had imagined. It had its own kitchen and its own bathroom, although not much more than that. Not that Izuku expected much longer, he slowly closed the door without looking back, managing to hear the laughter of his companions even from that distance. Only to then close the door. Izuku, I'll be fine, it's not the first time I'm alone. Remembering his childhood, I'm already used to it. A lie covered with the truth. As noble as he may say, for the sake of others? He didn't want this. No matter how beautiful a lie is, it is still a lie. Izuku, well, I'd better not think about it anymore. Shaking his head as he walked towards the bed where some boxes were all organized. My things. Opening said boxes, noticing that they were his belongings. I'll prepare something to eat, take a bath and go to sleep. Without realizing it, three shadows approached his door. Izuku, today was a tiring day and I doubt tomorrow will be the exception. It would be best to rest properly, and tomorrow I can talk to. A light knock on his door interrupted his words. Confused, not knowing who it could be, he headed towards the entrance and opened it with some foreclosure. Her eyes opened, her heart skipped a beat. The door opened completely without any fear. Hair as black as the most peaceful and relaxing night. Blonde hair as bright and warm as a summer day. And white and red hair that transmitted so much warmth to her being. Melissa, good evening. Izuku carrying some drinks in her hands. We brought you this. Momo, you are so careless, carrying several plates of food in his hands. You didn't notice that we were walking behind you. Shuko, excuse me. With a tender blush she hid what she was carrying in her hands behind her back. The three girls entered the small cabin, entering as if it were their own home. Izuku just stared at them in surprise. Izuku, girls, what are you doing here? Confused, how did you know I had arrived? I thought that. Momo, I saw you pass by the window pouting a little, and when I said I would go out for a second they followed me. Melissa, you didn't hide it much either, you know? Laughing, why else would you pick up several plates of food before leaving? Looking at Izuku, we figured you'd be hungry, so we brought this for you. It's delicious, hee. Shuko, Izuku closes the door, still with some shyness, hiding something, or it will start to get cold. Following his words, the door closed. Now the four of them were alone, away from everyone. Izuku, girls smiling, thanks. Approaching them, I'm very lucky to have you by my side. Noticing Shuko's attitude and staring at her, are you okay? You look quite red, do you have a fever? His protective side came out to rub. If you feel bad, it would be better if you went back. Shuko, I am fine. Something happening to her look. In a bold movement she subtly leaned her body until her forehead was against Izuku's VC. I don't have a fever. They looked directly into each other's eyes, even managing to feel each other's breathing. Their hearts began to beat strongly, not knowing how much longer they could resist the inevitable. Melissa, ahem, interrupting them, causing them to separate. She's fine, Izuku. She's just a little shy about what we brought her, and it seems she doesn't want to let it go. Shuko, hey, don't say it. Izuku, did they bring me a gift? His eyes lit up. During his life he hadn't received many gifts, and knowing that those girls brought him one excited him. What is that? A genuine smile formed on his lips. Only with them could he now truly express that joy. Shuko blushed a little more when she saw him. Seeing that boy acting so tender in her eyes was reaching her limit. And gathering all her courage she stopped hiding what she had on her back. Izuku, a green rabbit plushie? Melissa, Momo had the idea of giving you something. I thought it should be a stuffed animal, and Shuko thought of it being a rabbit, letting out a light laugh. The fact that it was green was just a coincidence. But in the end it looks a lot like you, hee. Momo, you gave us a stuffed animal, so we thought it was only fair that you had one too. Melissa, so? Don't stay quiet, keeping her smile. Do you like it? Izuku, yes. Slowly stretching out his hands. Thank you very much. When her hands reached the gift, she tried to take it, but she was surprised, just like the girls, that Shuko didn't want to let go no matter how much she gently pulled it. Izuku, this Shuko? Shuko, what's wrong? Looking away so he doesn't see her blush. Izuku, wiping a small drop of sweat from his temple, can I take it? Shuko, of course you can, it's yours. Again the action was repeated. No matter how much Izuku Shuko pulled him, he did not separate his hands from her soft fur. It was not until Melissa began to laugh with some force that she would finally let go. Melissa, ha ha ha, she doesn't want to stop hugging him with a mischievous smile. I never thought that one of the rudest and coldest girls I know would be so weak when it comes to cute things. Shuko's eyes snapped open and her face turned even more intensely red. Only for less than a second later she handed that stuffed animal to Izuku in his hands. Shuko, that's not true. Clearly embarrassed, Izuku, Shuko interrupting her, you don't have to feel ashamed because you like cute things. I still remember when on our outing after leaving the hospital at the end of the internship you wanted to buy a giant stuffed animal. Melissa, oh, I didn't know that. Momo, wow, I didn't expect that from you, Shuko, hee. Shuko, ah. Unable to bear her shame any longer, the girl got on her knees and covered her face entirely with her hands. She didn't want anyone to see her, but that didn't happen. Izuku, Shuko, look at me. Shuko, I don't want to. Faced with her refusal, Izuku bent down to be at her level, and with great delicacy he took the girl's hands. Shuko noticed the new scars that were now on her hands. The sensation of these was somewhat rough, but at the same time they transmitted a great warmth to her. Izuku, Shuko, please look at me. With a kind tone this time Izuku held her chin where she slowly raised her gaze to him. The girl's heart skipped a beat at his touch. Those kind eyes from which she felt something more than just friendship were still there. And that made her very happy. Izuku, you don't have to feel ashamed of your tastes. Believe me, I know from experience, he referring to all the merchandise he had from All Might. Besides, that side of you seems very tender to me. Taking her by the hand, since the day we met you have changed a lot. Shuko, does it bother you? Izuku, not at all, shaking his head. No matter what attitude you take, for me you will always be the beautiful girl I met. Fire. Small flames had been created in the middle of Shuko's hair. Her heart was beating very hard. Her cheeks were flushed, even reaching her ears. She could not help it any longer, and letting herself be carried away by a burst of bravery, she hugged him. Hug that Izuku gladly reciprocated. Shuko, if it's you, I don't mind you knowing it. Deepening the hug, I don't mind Momo and Melissa knowing it either, raising her face to look Izuku in the eyes, but don't tell anyone else again. Izuku, don't worry, I won't do it. Momo/Melissa, she gets so spoiled with him, they thought in unison. Izuku, also smiling slightly, knowing that I'm the only boy who knows that side of you, fills me with a strange pride and I don't want to share it with anyone else. Momo/Melissa, as greedy as ever. Knowing that this boy was still the same after everything that had happened in such a short time gave them great peace of mind. Lie, he was no longer the same, they just don't notice it yet. Momo, Izuku interrupting them while staring at them, I know you don't want the food I brought you to get cold, right? A chill ran down the spine of both Shuko and Izuku, especially. With a sweet tone, she only needed a few words for both of them to get up again as they separated. Now he could understand Ruji when his wife spoke to him in that same tone. Mother and daughter were quite alike. Izuku, I am sorry, Momo, he scratching his cheek, and of course I won't let the food get cold. The truth is I'm really hungry. Momo, I can imagine that hospital food was not at all something I would like to try again, handing him the plate of food. Izuku, enjoy the food. Melissa, don't forget the drinks. With loving smiles on his lips, Izuku began to eat with great enthusiasm, even choking a little because of how fast he ate, but nothing that the drinks Melissa brought couldn't help solve. Even so, he was so hungry that he ended up finishing after a few minutes. Izuku, that was delicious. Putting his hand on his stomach, I must get the number of that restaurant. Momo, you can ask Kirishima-kun later. He bringing her another plate, this time covered. Do you have room for dessert? I also brought you a slice of a cake that Sato-san baked, although her gaze slightly deviated as she uncovered the plate. I'm sorry, it was so delicious that I couldn't help but eat some first. Izuku, don't worry, I don't care. Smiling, thanks a lot, Momo. Momo, you may not care, but I do. An idea occurs to her. As compensation for my mistake, let me do this for you. The eyes of everyone present widened. The elegant young woman from one of the most important families in the country had brought the fork with a piece of cake directly to the mouth of a boy, being more than willing to feed him directly. Momo, accept this, Izuku, otherwise I wouldn't feel like I'm fixing my mistake without any other option. Izuku opened his mouth and was fed by a beautiful girl. Izuku, it's delicious. Momo, in that case I suppose you'll still accept me doing this, right? Another portion was delivered. Even despite the blush on his cheeks, Izuku felt immense peace right now. In truth, being next to those girls was the most relaxing thing for him right now. Momo, I'm glad to see that it doesn't bother you that I used to use this same fork to eat before. She blurted out this news without any mercy, making Izuku choke on what it meant. I've never seen any point in being embarrassed with that thing they call indirect kiss. At those words, Momo looked at her friends, who had expressions of both surprise and jealousy. And while Izuku recovered, the elegant girl looked with a hint of superiority at the other two girls in the room. That look alone was enough for both of them to understand that I wanted to tell them. This is because of what they did to me at the hospital. Melissa, by the way, Izuku, wanting to change the subject, which the others appreciated, I was able to find out something about that necklace. Izuku, I hear you touching it with his right hand. This thing is very uncomfortable, he complained. Melissa, it's not much, but it's already a step forward. Staring at it, that necklace is a final prototype to then implement the definitive version in the most important prisons in both Japan and the United States after some final tests. That information was predictable. There was a lot of classified information. I only managed to find out that the basis for its operation was implemented through the analysis of his quirk and blood samples from a Japanese citizen, but it didn't say anything else. Izuku, I understand feeling a little down. Maybe if I ask my sister, she can find out more about it. Melissa, also looking down a bit, I was able to find out that a large part of its manufacturing was done on the island. A small silence had been created, but it did not last long when Izuku held Melissa's hand, who raised her gaze once again. Izuku, thanks for finding out all that for me. Smiling, I hope that last thing didn't make you feel bad. You didn't know about its existence. It's not your fault. The girl's heart beat hard. A tender blush formed on her cheeks. It was strange, but the smallest actions made her very happy only if Izuku did them. Having him back by her side after everything that happened at camp and later only made her appreciate these moments more. Melissa, I know, also holding her hand, and don't worry, I won't do it. Seeing something on Izuku's lips, having an idea. By the way, Izuku, you have some cake on your lips. Izuku, huh? Where? Wiping the wrong side. Melissa, it's here. Melissa's hand gently passed over Izuku's lips, dragging the small pieces of cake still on them. That alone made the boy blush again, but it didn't end there. Melissa shamelessly brought the small pieces of cake on her finger to her own lips and ate them with an unexpected sensuality in her actions. Melissa, what a delicious taste! The thread of saliva between her lips and her finger was visible. I could get used to it very quickly. She narrowed her eyes, taking a few steps closer to Izuku while moving her hips. I could even become addicted. What do you think, Izuku? Izuku's young teenage mind almost went into a total meltdown at the sight before him. With a triumphant smile, Melissa turned her gaze towards her friends, who had a nervous tick on their faces. That had been the most direct hint they had ever seen. None were left behind. Resuming her calm demeanor, Shuko put aside Melissa's actions and approached the boy to talk about something serious with him. Shuko, Izuku, where have you been all day? That question surprised the boy. How did he know? He wondered for a moment. He hadn't told anyone about his discharge from the hospital and subsequent meeting with his grandfather. Izuku, how? Shuko, Fuyumi told me. I reveal without problem she wanted to visit you this morning, but the nurses told her that you had already left. A look of concern appeared in Shuko's eyes and surprise appeared in the other two's eyes as they approached and stood beside their friend. They waited for an answer. He couldn't lie to them, but he didn't want to tell them the truth either. Izuku, I was looking away a little. I was busy with some matters next to Director Nezu. His gaze again turned to those three girls and he smiled at them again. But this time it was different. It was a smile that for many years he had to put on his lips. One that was appearing very often again. A fake smile. Izuku, girls, it's getting a little late. Wanting to change the subject. Tomorrow we start classes again. Heading towards the boxes on his bed. I thank you for the food and the gift, but I have to clean my room and then sleep. In response, the girls held an emergency meeting, gathering in a circle and whispering to each other, being as quiet as possible. Momo, something's wrong with him. Shuko, he behaves like I once did. I don't like it. Melissa, something must have happened on the side of Director Nezu that he doesn't want to tell us. The three of them talked for a few more seconds, which seemed like an eternity. In the end, they all nodded. They rejected Izuku's hint to leave, if he was meddling in other people's affairs, just as he did with each of them. Why couldn't they do the same with him? Greedy, unfair. And yet, Izuku, what are they doing? His eyes widened slightly in surprise. Those girls, instead of retreating to their respective bedrooms, stayed by his side. No, it was even more than that. Without thinking for a single second, the three of them began to help him unpack his belongings. Momo, I doubt you want to be alone right now. Melissa, no matter what you say, we want to be by your side right now. Shuko, you have helped us many times. This is the least we can do for you. They are wrong. They were not in debt to him. It was quite the opposite. Izuku's eyes became slightly moist, thanking internally that he wasn't alone in these confusing times for him. Yes, he had a clear goal, but being clear about his ideals doesn't make them any easier to follow. The boxes were opened one by one, arranging the boys' different belongings. Momo, I had forgotten all the posters you have of Almight. Izuku, why yes, scratching his head a little nervously. I can't help it, you know. Momo, I understand you. Izuku, smiling at him. I admit that it would be hard for me to sleep with so many posters on the walls, but I like that side of you. Blushes slightly despite what they tell you. You don't hide your tastes, putting the stuffed rabbit on a shelf where there was only a single book next to it. Izuku, hey Momo, can I ask you a favor? Momo, sure, sticking her arm with Izuku's while arranging some last things. Tell me what you need and I'll see what I can do. Izuku, I would like you to help me get a book. Momo, sure. Her eyes lit up, her love for reading coming to the surface. What book are you interested in reading? Excited like a little girl. We could read together while enjoying a nice tea. Izuku, that would be nice. Looking at that book next to the stuffed animal. I've wanted to ask you that favor for a while. I'd like to read the story of Epimetheus. Momo, that book, the same one that was in perfect condition in her grandfather's lair. Sticking her body a little closer to Izuku's. It may take a while, but I'll try. Smiling, I would also like to read the complete story of that hero. A pleasant chat was going on between those two. Meanwhile, in the other corner of the room, Melissa and Shuko were also organizing Izuku's belongings. Melissa, this is, opening a box, blushing at its contents, Izuku's underwear. His gaze was lost in those clothes. His hormonal teenage mind played a trick on him, imagining what they covered. Slowly his hands approached. His breathing began to become heavy between light gasps. What was she going to do? She asked herself many times, but she kept bringing her hands closer, and when she was about to hold them, Shuko appeared behind her. Shuko, who would have thought that one of the most prestigious young inventors would be getting closer to her ear to whisper pervert. Melissa, scared, calling Izuku's attention. It's not what it seems. Shuko's revenge was underway. That was how their relationship had become in the time they knew each other, and they began to call each other by their names. They both bothered each other, and did not pass up the opportunity to make fun of the other. But neither of them took it the wrong way. They just planned how to get back at each other. Luckily for Melissa, Izuku, she had arrived and with a cry of embarrassment told them that he would take care of that box, taking it away from them. So the minutes passed, and between the four of them the room was completely tidy and every box was empty. Momo, okay, that would be all. Shaking her hands. It was much easier than tidying up my room. Melissa, Izuku, if I run out of space in my room, would you let me store some inventions here? Shuko, don't accept Izuku, he'll probably hide some cameras in them. Melissa, I'm not like that. A small clock on the wall with the image of Almight was ticking, tick-tock, tick-tock. Even if they went much faster with the help of several people, time continued to move forward and it was already late. It was almost time to return, and they all knew it. Shuko, Izuku approaching him until they were face to face. You don't have to tell us where you were if you don't want to. The boy felt like he had been hit in the heart. He had promised that there would be no more lies, not with them at least, and although he didn't lie, he didn't tell them the truth either. Izuku, I'm sorry. Shuko, I already told you it's okay, but looking him straight in the eyes, I would like to know, why didn't you go into the bedroom with all of us? Momo, I'd also like to know something. Joining the conversation. Why does it seem like you force yourself to smile sometimes? Melissa, that's not right. Finally joining. I don't think anyone can understand everything you're going through right now, but distancing yourself from your friends, from us, is not the solution. Silence, that was all. Was he really that easy to read? No, it was just that they already knew him very well and knew something wasn't quite right. There was no point in hiding his fears. He was human, after all. Izuku, he did it to keep the group together. Finally revealed. I don't want the group to split up because of me, even though I know that's impossible. It's just a clown's idea that everything stays the same after knowing the truth. Looking down. Kirishima, Kaminari, Mineta, Ashido, Uraraka, Jiro, and you guys are the first people I formed a genuine bond with. Slightly clenching his fists. I know you'll talk a lot about me and I don't want any of you to get involved. That's why I didn't come in. I wanted you to at least have a day where you're all united as a class again. The girls looked at each other, not knowing what to do or say to them. There was no need. To the surprise of the three, the same Izuku looked up while smiling. No one was clear if it was a true or a false. Izuku, and yet I don't want to part with any of them. The words of All for One No, his grandfather echoed in his mind. It's okay to be selfish. Izuku, that's why I keep smiling, even if it's hard for me sometimes. No matter how many times they ridicule me and I become a laughingstock, the target of their criticism, how they don't stop defaming me and questioning all my actions. No matter how desperate reality is, I need to keep smiling. A strong feeling struck the girls' hearts. Their fists clenched gently, swallowing some saliva. They could feel their eyes moisten slightly. Izuku, if I don't, how will I make others smile? The tone in which he said those words was choppy, as if he had trouble holding back his tears. Momo/Shuko/Melissa, why are you so? Izuku, I have cried a lot in my life. I have been alone many times, and that is why I do not want anyone to go through the same thing. That is why if there is someone crying in front of me, I have to make them smile. Izuku, I promised the three of them to be their hero. Taking a step forward now, Izuku had them right in front of him. In all this time that they had known them, he had grown. He was no longer that short boy, although he was still not taller than them. He could now look them directly in the eyes. Izuku, I don't want to ever be apart from you. Bringing his hand to his chest, I've avoided this for a long time. But after all this I can't anymore. His cheeks blushed, and his heart was beating hard. I want to tell you something. Finally he will say it. The long wait was over, but unfortunately he would not be the one to take the initiative. Shuko, I'm tired. With her hair covering her eyes, I'm tired of always hearing that phrase. With a strong determination, the girl looked up, without shame, without embarrassment. She gathered every bit of courage in her body. She grabbed the neck of a bewildered Izuku only to pull him with all her strength, and finally it happened. Their lips kissed. Momo/Melissa, Ayaha. Their lips touched. In that instant they felt like they were melting a little. Both felt the breath through the other's nose. Time froze for them. They moved their lips slightly. They felt rough, dry, with clumsy movements. It was the kiss of two complete inexperienced people. And yet, it felt so warm. Momo/Melissa, what do you think you're doing? They raised their voices in clear annoyance and jealousy. Such an action made both young people separate, remaining joined only by a light thread of saliva protruding from their mouths. And they looked into each other's eyes while they caught their breath. Even despite the other two's complaints, Shuko would ignore them for now. Izuku's Shuko. Shuko. That was bringing her fingers to her lips as she caught her breath. That was my first kiss. A tender blush took over her cheeks. I thought that first kisses were meant to be softer, more tender, and so on. Wouldn't a little kiss have been better? Izuku, but you party who kissed me. Shuko, I know, and I know it's too late to say that. Holding Izuku's shirt. This is bad. I can't stand it any longer. Getting ahead of everyone with her answer. My feelings for you are so strong that they made me do this without thinking. This is bad. If I continue like this, I'll start saying that embarrassing garbage. Her body was trembling slightly, which was noticed by Izuku, who instinctively wrapped his arms around her body in his warm embrace, an action that made Shuko jump slightly in shock. Shuko, Izuku, you are my hero. It was thanks to you that I was able to open my heart more to people, even if I was mean to you and gave you more than enough reasons to get away from me. You didn't do it. I still perfectly remember your words when we faced each other at the sports festival. Hiding her face between Izuku's chest. Ugh. I don't want to seem pathetic around you, but my legs won't stop shaking just because I kissed you. I've wanted to say this for a long time. I love you. With light blows to Izuku's chest, Shuko continued talking as if they were the only two people in the entire world. Shuko, I thought I could handle this just fine, but just one kiss made me lose my cool. Feeling Izuku's hug a little tighter. I keep falling harder. What am I going to do if I end up loving you more than this? Letting himself be carried away by his desires, Izuku gently raised Shuko's face with his hand. Izuku, is that something bad? Shuko, God, you're so cool. I don't even want to say this. You're so cool, Izuku. Endless emotions and memories invaded her mind and heart. All your battles, all your words, all your promises, I remember them all. Feeling Izuku's hand rest on her cheek. Even with everything you've been through, you keep going. Anyone else would have collapsed, but not you. You still think about your dream. You still think about the good of others. The hero I fell in love with is still there, and I love it. Both of their hearts were beating hard inside their chests, and without being able to avoid it, their faces were getting closer again as they stared into each other's eyes. Then they realized that they were not alone in the room. Melissa, that's enough. Grabbing Shuko by the shoulders and pushing her behind her. And you, Izuku, listen to me. Izuku, why yes. There were no words spoken. Imitating Shuko's action, Melissa held the boy's shirt in front of her and pulled him towards her, giving him a kiss on the lips as well. The surprise was evident. Melissa was more aggressive than Shuko. She was still inexperienced, but there was more energy in her movements. After a few seconds had passed, they both separated, leaving a thread of saliva that united them again. Melissa, I like you too, she rebels, full of courage. Izuku, you saved my life, you saved my father, my home, and everything I knew. Remembering the island incident, it was thanks to you that I had the courage to find my own path. To not feel trapped in my father's shadow. Taking him by the cheek, seeing how you try your hardest to achieve your dreams, seeing how despite falling you get up again and never give up. Slowly approaching his face. At first he only admired you and made little jokes about you, but with your words and actions you made that change. Slowly closing his eyes. For that and much more you will have to take responsibility for what you did to me. Take responsibility for making me fall in love with you. History repeats itself. Before a second kiss was given, Melissa had been pushed by Momo, who had a big blush all over her face, resembling in intensity Kirishima's hair. But Momo was more shy in that sense than the others. She just remained silent in front of the boy, constantly moving her hands, looking nervous. It was more than clear that she also wanted to say a few words. Momo, Kia! A small scream left her lips when she delicately felt Izuku's hands on her cheeks, forcing her to raise her head, which was bowed in shyness, so that her beautiful black eyes met Izuku's bright green eyes. Neither of them said a single word, but they didn't need to. She was the first to know him, the first to trust him. That day in his mansion where they met, he was already helping her, keeping quiet about her hiding place so that the family butler wouldn't find her. Even though he was a stranger, they started a bond with something as small as a simple reading of an old book. Momo, do you still remember the day we met? Seeing Izuku nod that day, even though I was a complete stranger to you, you helped me, and not only that, but also despite not being obligated, you accepted a selfish whim of mine, smiling as the blush diminished. But was still clearly present that afternoon we spent reading books is one I will never forget, placing her hand on Izuku's chest. More specifically on top of his heart that day we both read the story of the Argonaut, and to think that you even got to name yourself after that hero, like yours, forming a warm smile like the one that day. Since that day my days have been better, training together, going to high school together, and then to the academy. I feel a light tear spilled down her cheeks. I feel like it was a matter of destiny that we met. Gently Izuku wiped away such tears with his thumbs. Before him was one of the most beautiful sights. The gaze of a woman in love can really be truly captivating. Momo, Izuku, I like you. Getting a little closer to him, bringing his hands together, and hugging him behind his head, a third kiss was given. This one was different. With Shuko they both interacted in the same way. With Melissa she had more control of the situation, and with Momo it was the opposite. She let herself be carried away by the moment. After finishing that kiss, the other two girls in the room rushed towards them. They had already talked and expressed their feelings. Now it was Izuku's turn to clearly say what he felt for them. However, Momo didn't want to let him go. She wanted to have him for herself for a few more seconds. The result was a small scuffle where, through carelessness, the four of them fell to the ground. By reflex, Izuku had positioned himself beneath them, all to cushion the impact and prevent injuries. Izuku, are you okay? I speak with a small tone of pain. Why you didn't hurt yourselves? Melissa, could you stop being you for just a moment? Getting up slightly like the other two, but still on top of Izuku. The three of us have already said what we feel for you, now it's your turn. The cheeks of the three of them were flushed, not only because of his words, but also because of the position they were in. Shuko, it doesn't matter if you choose one of us or none, just say clearly how you feel. That's a lie, all three wanted to be the winners, but that couldn't happen, could it? Momo, whatever your decision we will respect it. The three of them were a bit lost and uncomfortable with the situation in question. Wanting none of them to suffer the bitter rejection was absurd, right? Izuku. This is harder to say than I thought. Ha. A slight nervous laugh left his lips, and then he stayed silent for a few seconds while he gathered all his courage. I can't reciprocate the feelings of just one of you. He closed his eyes and swallowed some saliva. The girls, for their part, felt a tightening in their chest, sensing that something had begun to break. The mere thought of rejection made her tears begin to flow uncontrollably. Luckily, Izuku had opened his eyes in time, and upon noticing the pained expressions on the three of them, he quickly reacted. Izuku, don't get me wrong. Raised his voice, causing the three of them to look at him. What I meant to say is that as bad as it sounds, I am not in love with just one person. His fists clenched. Was this really okay? There would be many consequences if he continued forward, possibly getting hurt later on, as well as them. It's okay to be selfish. Once again, his grandfather's words echoed in his mind, giving him a strange impulse to keep going. Deep down, he himself wanted this. Izuku, I am aware that I sound like a jerk, an idiot, and a complete imbecile, but what I'm going to tell you is the truth, exclaims with great embarrassment. Shuko, Izuku? Her heart beats hard. Momo, what are you talking about? Her face blushed again as she imagined what he meant. Melissa, why you mean that you? A peculiar smile appeared slightly on her lips. Izuku, why yes, I am. His face turned so red that it looked like a strawberry. His breathing was labored, his chest hurt from the force of his heartbeat. He gulped, gathered his courage again, looked them straight in the eyes, and finally spoke the truth. I love all three of you. He screamed loudly, finally letting out that feeling that had been rooted in his heart for a long time. Fortunately for him, the small bedroom they were in was far enough away from the main one where his other classmates were. They were alone in their little world, secluded by the walls of this cozy abode they would call home for a while. Izuku, I'm the worst, he replied to himself, hiding his face with his hands. I must look pathetic, right? Taking his hands off his face. I'm just an idiot who just confessed to three girls at the same time. This is completely absurd. But I wanted to say it once, and for all. Turning his gaze to the ceiling, I really am a very greedy person. I can't reciprocate the feelings of a single one of you no matter how much I want to. My heart wouldn't fully accept you if it weren't all three. The three girls stepped back a little at his words. Feeling the extra weight on their bodies, they slowly got up from the ground. Now the four of them were sitting face to face. Izuku, I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I wasn't able to find another answer to what I feel for you. Looking down, only by your side do I feel calm. Only with you do I feel that I'm complete. A somewhat painful laugh came out of his mouth. Each one worked up the courage to confess their feelings towards me. And I, on the other hand, am unable to choose. The three of them looked at each other, the words, "I love all three of you," still hovering in each of their minds, repeating constantly. Their cheeks were flushed. They were happy that the boy they loved felt the same. But all three of them at the same time? Izuku, I'm sorry if I said something stupid. Not hearing any response, I just wanted to finally get off my chest what I felt for you. Giving a heavy sigh, thinking that I had ruined your friendship. I don't want to force you into anything. I just wish for your happiness above all things. Slowly looking up, I know asking this is out of place right now. But can we still be friends? His eyes snapped open at the sight of each one's big blush girls. The next thing he felt was the impact of them on his body, hugging him very tightly while he felt their tears on his face. The four of them remained silent for a whole minute. Izuku, are you sure about this? The three of them nodded. Izuku began to shed a few small tears as his arms wrapped around them in a warm hug. Izuku, many would say that they have no self-love. The first to look up was Shuko. Shuko, I don't care about other people's opinions. It's my life and only I have the right to choose who to live it with. Izuku, they will call us immoral. The second to look up was Melissa. Melissa, a society that wishes so much harm to an innocent boy just because his grandfather is a villain has no right to judge us. It was more than clear what she meant. They had seen the comments on social media with great anger. Melissa was even willing to make a computer virus to attack the devices of all the people who wished Izuku death. But that was another separate topic that she didn't share with anyone, although it was still in the plans. Izuku, I don't want to force them to go through this. And finally the last one to raise her head was Momo. Momo, you're not doing it. Looking at the other two, it's strange and somewhat uncomfortable. I don't deny it. At first I didn't like the idea, but now I don't mind starting this, if it's next to my best friends. Melissa, we know the consequences, but as long as we are together we will get through this as it has been until now. Shuko, if we have problems we will solve them together. Their lips met again for a second. Momo, if we have doubts, we will solve them together. A second kiss was given, only to be followed by Melissa giving it to him before speaking. Melissa, if we ever get scared, we'll give each other courage. If they get hurt, they will heal and share scars. If they were to fight, they would fight together. If they were to cry, they would be the pillars on which everyone would lean. If you smile, all four of you will smile, genuinely. Melissa, this is your fault for making us fall in love with you. Izuku smiling at him. Now as the man that you are, you must take responsibility for your actions and let us be by your side, okay? Calmly and very gently, Izuku began to get up from the ground, followed by those girls who, like him, began to wipe away the tears that still ran down their cheeks. Izuku, it's true, I must accept responsibility. Giving a small laugh, I wonder if this is a dream, and if I'm still unconscious after the fight against Muscular, smiling while looking at the girls because I feel very happy right now. So happy that if it were up to me I would go out right now and shout with all my strength how much I love them. Those words touched them. Momo, as much as I would like to see that, I would prefer that you didn't. Besides, it is best to keep the secret of this from everyone. Izuku, you're right, stretching out his hands for them to take. So does this mean that we are? Melissa, that's right, with a wide, somewhat mischievous smile accepted. Izuku, you won the lottery. Izuku, I did from the moment I met them. Melissa, how great! Running to hug him. They loved him, he loved them. Words were unnecessary, they did not need to be said. A new, unconventional relationship was born tonight. Shuko, it's time to go. I speak in a calm tone, contrasting with the effort I was making to separate Melissa from Izuku. If we take a little longer, they might come out to look for us. Melissa, I don't want to. Clinging to her now boyfriend. Momo, if a teacher were to find us, we would only put Izuku in more trouble. A little lie, however, Melissa's pout indicated that it was working. Melissa, okay, but I'm not leaving without getting something from Izuku. Izuku, something from me? Confused, what do you need? A smile of victory appeared on her lips. Her eyes lit up as if it were a quirk. With great energy she commented. Melissa, I want you to give me a goodnight kiss, hee. Both Momo and Shuko blushed. Sometimes they forget how forward their friend was when it came to things she liked. Without wasting a single second and with some embarrassment, Izuku was now the one who gave a kiss to his now girlfriend. At this rate, he would become an expert. Melissa, hee, you're so cute and tender when you get like that. With a laughing smile she looked tenderly at the boy's blush, although I also love to see that side of you when you get serious. His words, somewhat harsh in tone due to the way he said them, were ignored. Momo, see you tomorrow. Izuku, have a good night. She spoke in a refined tone. Her years of etiquette training were deeply rooted, however. At all times Momo looked at Izuku's lips, an action that was noticed by the boy, and he miraculously understood what she wanted. Izuku, you too have a good night, Momo, giving her a delicate kiss which was reciprocated with joy. Momo, bringing her fingers to her lips, Melissa is right, if I'm not careful I could become addicted to this sensation, blushes. Shuko, are you done? Looking away, but the tips of her reddened ears showed her nervousness. Izuku, Shuko, do you also want a goodnight kiss? Giving a small jump, the cold girl had begun to say incoherent words while she joined her fingers and lowered her gaze due to her hidden shyness. Melissa, that's as far as bravery goes. If you don't want it, I can take it for you. Shuko, of course not. I complain, it's just that. Before anything else could happen, Izuku took his girlfriend's cheek and gently gave her a warm kiss. When they separated she was completely blushing, but with a big smile on her lips. Izuku, this is also something embarrassing for me, but kissing is something that couples do, right? Shuko, why yes. Complete inexperienced people without a doubt. A minute later the three girls left their now boyfriend's small bedroom. It felt strange, although the one who had the least problems with the idea was Melissa, who was excited to try this new experience, as long as it was with her best friends. There will be difficult moments, full of joy, sadness, tears, but in the end they will stay together, right? Izuku, leaning on the door, what a day, I couldn't stop smiling. I guess I'd better take a bath before sleeping. He had already eaten, the room was tidy, and with the help of his girlfriends it was much quicker to settle into his new home. Girlfriends? He laughed with some embarrassment at that. For him the fact that no girl approached him during his childhood was something he never thought he would have. During those years not all of them looked down on him just for being a quirkless. It was that those who didn't preferred not to approach him for fear that the others would separate them from the group or worse, start bothering them too. Even in that sense, Katsuki Bakugo tormented him indirectly by being the main actor in his torment. During his long and pleasant bath Izuku only let those bad memories pass. Things had changed. He was no longer a helpless child. Coming out of the bathroom, feeling his body more relaxed and clean, he was getting ready to go to bed to finally sleep, but not before passing by the shelf where the stuffed animal that was given to him was, next to it the book that inspired him, Argonaut, but he felt that something was missing. Izuku, much better leaving a photo of himself with his mother. I hope you are well. Lowering his gaze a little, if you were to find out about my new relationship, I'm sure it would bother you. Haha, sigh, I miss you so much. It was no wonder. The little visit he received at the hospital lasted very little. The last time they were truly able to live together as a family had occurred before leaving for camp. Izuku, I promised to write you lots of letters. Leaving the photo aside and heading to bed, but as he walked through the door, he heard it being lightly knocked. Huh? Did one of the girls forget something? Opening the door with obvious joy, but such emotion vanished in a single instant when seeing who it was. Izuku Bakugo? Remembering bad times minutes before didn't help hide his frown. What are you doing here? Looking at his still bandaged hands, not feeling much. Katsuki. Hello, TT. Seeing Izuku's frown, getting a little scared. Midoriya. Trembled slightly. Izuku noticed it clearly. The strong image he had disappeared, revealing the truth. The weak he. Seeing him in that state, Izuku only felt indifference. They remained silent for several seconds, until finally one of them broke the silence. Izuku, what do you want? Sighing, tomorrow there are classes and I have to sleep. Staring him straight in the eyes. Whatever you're going to tell me, do it quickly. He didn't care about anything about himself anymore. He didn't even ask when he saw his bandaged hands if he should still be in the hospital. He just wanted to sleep, and Katsuki Bakugo was once again a nuisance to him. Katsuki. His lips trembled slightly. I wanted to tell you, gulped. Clearly he wasn't okay after being tortured for 2 days straight. The scars on his body still burned, and seeing the scars on Izuku's hands was another blow to his conscience. I'm sorry. A cold air current passed between the two. Izuku in response unconsciously held the door frame a little tighter. Izuku, what did you just say? Unbelieving. Bakugo. TCH lightly clicking his tongue, he regained his courage. I said that I'm sorry. Raising the tone of his voice, I'm sorry for everything. That he fell silent when Izuku raised his right hand. Izuku, I thought I heard it wrong, but I realized that's not the case. You, of all people, apologize to me? A small laugh came out of his lips. I guess now I've seen everything in this day. A laugh began to leave her lips. It was small and soft, but it didn't stop, lasting for a full minute until it finally stopped. Izuku, I don't know how you got here, but you better go back to the hospital if your hands still are like this. Starting to close the door. Katsuki, wait. Getting him to stop and well? Izuku, so what? Katsuki, do you accept my apologies? A second gust of air passed between them, much colder than the previous one. That cold turned into a shiver that ran up his spine, making him question for a second if the wind had really caused it. Izuku, of course, I don't accept your attempt at an apology, he declared forcefully. It's okay to be selfish. Only then can you avoid being hurt again. Or are you able to forgive all the people who hurt you so much? His grandfather's words resonated more than ever. Despite his resolve to listen to himself, he couldn't help but remember them, and the thing is, he agreed with those words to begin with. Katsuki, what? Izuku, are you surprised? Looking him in the eyes, making him instinctively take a few steps back. Do you expect me to forgive you so easily for more than 10 years of making my life miserable? He was irritated. Do you think everything will be solved with a simple, I'm sorry? Slowly closing the door. Don't be stupid, save your apologies. No matter how many times you say them, I will never accept them. Katsuki was left without saying a single word. He just watched helplessly as the one he once called friend closed the door in his face. Izuku, goodbye. Katsuki Bakugo. The door closed, saying goodbye in 2 different ways. Katsuki was left alone in the middle of the cold night, silently returning to where he had come from. As he walked, a small drop had fallen to the ground, a solitary tear. His mother's advice to fix his mistakes and be a better person would be much more difficult than he thought. But the first step is to accept your faults. His journey was just beginning. Class at dormitories. Midnight. Momo, Shuko, Melissa, stealthily opening their respective room doors and looking down the hall. Well, there's no one, carrying in their hands a pillow, a sheet, and the stuffed animal that Izuku gave them. The party had already ended many minutes ago. By this point everyone was already asleep, at which point the girls took advantage and left their respective rooms in complete silence. Neither of them knew anything about each other. Since they were on different floors, they didn't realize they had the same idea. It wasn't until they reached the common room that they ran into each other. Momo, Shuko, Melissa, what are you two going to do? They whispered at the same time while condemning each other's actions. Did we have the same idea? Blushing at that thought. For their good or bad luck, a new pair of footsteps were heard, constantly approaching in their direction, leaving them with no other option than to hide so as not to be discovered. Jiro, my throat burns. Entering the kitchen, turning on the light. Stupid Kirishima, making me sing several songs in a row, pouring himself a glass of water. Although the fact that he was the one who praised me the loudest was very nice. Blushes, but was it necessary to say in front of everyone that I had a beautiful voice? Playing with his jack while finishing his glass of water. Idiot. She was still very sleepy, so much so that she hadn't even noticed how cute she looked right now in her pajamas. Melissa, with some malice, took a picture of her. Maybe in the future she could play a joke on her. She was sure it would work. After all, she looked very cute and she knew Jiro wouldn't like that. Jiro, huh? Looking at the furniture, I thought I heard something yawning again. Must have been my imagination. Retreating back to her room, fortunately for Melissa, she was nervous when she received Shuko and Momo's inquisitive glances at her back. Melissa, it was close, hee with a small drop of sweat running down her temple. I assume we all had the same idea. Both nodded with some embarrassment. Good. The three girls in complete silence headed towards the door. Fortunately, Melissa had managed to deactivate the door alarm using a small device, and that was how the three of them, upon feeling the cold night air, shivered for a moment, but when they covered themselves with their sheets they continued on their way. Momo, G-girls looking a little scared. What if we go back? Walking next to her friends, managing to see her objective in the distance. What if they discover us? Melissa, you can come back if you want. In response, Momo made a cute pout. Don't worry. I managed to bypass the dorm security system. They'll never know we left. No one looked very convinced. Also, while we were organizing Izuku's things, get in touch if there were no hidden cameras or microphones, and there's nothing like that anywhere. Shuko, are you sure? Melissa completely puffs out her chest with pride. This isn't the first time I've bypassed the security system. Shuko, what do you mean? Melissa, scratching her head a little. Yes, I used to do it very often where I stayed on the island, so I could work all night on my projects without my father finding out that I was staying up late. Momo, I wonder what our parents would think if they knew what we were doing. Blushes even more. The three of us have the same guy as a boyfriend and we haven't even been together for a day and we're already going to spend the night in his room. It's much more embarrassing if we say it out loud. Melissa, yes, it's true. Her blush contrasted with her somewhat different smile. My father would surely have a fit of rage. Momo, don't you think Melissa has a weird face right now? Whispering to Shuko. Shuko, more than a strange face, she seems to be excited. She also responded in whispers while covering her breasts with her arms perverted. Melissa, and how do you think your parents would react? Momo, mine is capable and I hired mercenaries to hunt down Izuku. Exaggerating her response. Shuko, I don't really know. Before I would have thought that as long as I gave him strong grandchildren he wouldn't care who he was with. Lowering his head, but now I'm not sure. She remembered her father still unconscious in the hospital due to the severity of his injuries. He was strong, she was sure of that. So strong that sooner or later he would wake up and they could finally have an important conversation, but in the meantime. Melissa, okay, we arrived in front of Izuku's door. Any plans on how to open it? Momo, I'll take care of it, taking the door knob while activating her quirk. For a few seconds the door would open ready. Shuko, how did you do that? Momo, after some villains kidnapped my parents and Almight saved them, they paid an instructor to teach me some ways to escape in case the same thing happened to me, including this. Showing the newly created key. Using my quirk in a specific way can create a copy of Izuku's key. Melissa, well done. Momo excited. Now she can finally spend some time in the same bed with him, just like you did before. Momo, that moment was just for an emergency. The memory of that day never disappeared and they reminded her of it very often. Shuko, tell him it's not. She had already entered with Melissa leaving her behind. With a big pout on her face, Momo entered and closed the door very carefully, making sure not to make any noise, but not before making sure that no one had seen them, and upon knowing that this was not the case, she sighed with relief. I was wrong. Principal's office. Nezu, wow, this is a surprise. Sitting at his desk, he was watching several screens which recorded the surroundings of Izuku's bedroom, all while in his hands he had one of his quirk analysis notebooks while next to it he had the rest. Nezu, I only put cameras on the tops of the trees surrounding the place. I didn't want him to accidentally find one. I figured he wouldn't see anything of value for quite some time, but luckily I was wrong on that aspect. Haha. Closing the notebook and throwing it aside after finishing reading it. This is much better than I thought. Smiling, you don't have to have cameras or microphones inside to know what happens when a man and a woman are alone in a room in the middle of the night, and it's even worse if there are several women at the same time. Taking a new notebook and beginning to read it, the director couldn't stop smiling. After having lost ground with Star's arrival and request, he now felt completely ahead again. Nezu, apparently Almight didn't get to teach you why the bearer of one for all shouldn't have a partner. Haha, looking at the sky while smiling even more strongly. For the moment I won't say anything. I'll let them trust each other. This information will be very useful to me later. Izuku's room. Izuku, ma. With a small gasp, Izuku slowly opened his eyes. As his consciousness returned, he noticed something blurry in front of him. The entire place was almost completely dark, the only visible light coming from a small window that let in the moonlight. What time was it? He asked himself, and when he tried to move to grab his cell phone and find out the answer, he realized that he couldn't move either. An extra weight on his body prevented him from doing so. Izuku, what is it? Still asleep, Izuku slowly opened his eyes wider and hoped that they would adapt to the darkness. Little by little he could notice 3 pairs of circles of different sizes, each one oscillating like pendulums in front of him in a hypnotic movement. When he woke up completely, he realized who they were. Izuku, you wa! Raising his voice in a small scream, noticing his 3 now girlfriends on top of him, while he covered them with his sheets. What are you doing? His heart beat very hard, pumping large amounts of blood throughout his body. Seeing his girlfriend's pajamas would have already been very stimulating for him, but having them on top of his body while sharing the same bed was taking him to the limit. Melissa, is that the reaction you should have when you see your cute girlfriends in pajamas? Shaking head in a playful tone. Too bad, Izuku. Izuku, what are you doing here? Melissa, what's not obvious? With a mischievous smile on her lips, Melissa approached, running her hands over his hard chest and ending by whispering in his ear. Melissa, I want to sleep next to you, giving him a little kiss on the cheek. She lay down directly to the left of her boyfriend, using his arm as a pillow. You already shared the same bed as Momo, and with Shuko clarification, as one of your girlfriends I can't stay behind the other 2. Where did this girl get the courage to be so direct? The other 3 wondered. Shuko, I came quickly, lying down on Izuku's right side and then hugging him like a giant stuffed animal. I came to make sure Melissa didn't do anything depraved to you. With a deep blush she lied, while subtly increasing the strength of her hug to make her breasts stand on Izuku's side. Melissa, hey, I wouldn't be able to do anything depraved to Izuku. I refute, not without his consent at least, imitating Shuko's hug. Shuko, does it bother you that we are here? Ignoring the complaints. Izuku, and no, swallowing. It doesn't bother me, it just surprised me. But looking at Shuko's breasts, which was his plan, which he enjoyed, it's just that now feeling Melissa's breasts, not being able to help but turn and look at them. Don't you think this is going too fast? Shuko, is that a no? Looking at him tenderly. Izuku, damn, shuddered, they're all too cute. Oh, okay. Momo, it seems like you're taking it very well. She leaned on Izuku's chest as there was no more space between her arms. Izuku, it's possible now. Momo's breasts also entered his field of vision. I still don't believe this. Looking at the ceiling, maybe this is all a dream, since I don't think I'll be so lucky. Momo, then why don't you prove that this isn't a dream? A subtle hint. If it weren't for Momo's blushing cheeks, very few would have given her what she wanted to ask, but Izuku did it. And with great care not to dislodge the 2 girls in his arms, he stood up slightly and kissed the girl in front of him. That kiss lasted only a few seconds, but it was very warm, and a slight improvement in the boy's way of kissing was already beginning to be seen. Momo, have you checked it yet? Izuku, yes, but I would like to repeat the test again, smiling just to be sure. Momo, greedy. Izuku, I know. And once again they both kissed. While they did so, both Shuko and Melissa couldn't help but look at Momo's big breasts pressing on Izuku's chest. Both of them had no way of beating them if they competed in that one aspect. But it wasn't like they didn't have their own strong points. Momo, leaning entirely on Izuku, your heart is beating very hard. Izuku, the weird thing would be if I didn't do it with them by my side, earning a little laugh from Momo. Melissa. Izuku, look at me. Paying attention to his words, she stole a kiss from him which lasted a few moments. I really like your kisses. Leaning better in his arms, it would be better if we went to sleep. We have to go back early so they don't discover us. Izuku, you're right, good. His words stopped when he felt Shuko lightly press his right side as she looked at him with eyes filled with shyness, but at the same time with desire. He still had a lot to learn, as he understood that for these matters Shiko might not say much about her desires and only gave small signs which he would have to identify. Izuku, sorry, I'm still new to this. Shiko, don't worry, I am too. One last kiss had been given. As they separated, the happy girl settled down like the other two in her new territory, preparing to go to sleep with a big smile on her lips. Izuku stared at the ceiling for a few more minutes, remembering everything that had happened in such a short time. The dim moonlight had illuminated that shelf where it was now full. The picture of him and his mother, the book that inspired him, and those stuffed animals that helped forge the great bond they now had. The green bunny stuffed animal was in the middle, the panda bear on his right side, the polar bear on his left, and the brown one was in front, lying merely between the bunny's paws. Izuku, is all this okay? There was no regret. I still don't have a clear answer, but for now I'll continue like this because I am. In that last minute of silence he could have told them that he went to talk to his grandfather, that he talked to Bakugo again, about how he didn't feel anything when he saw him even though he was in that state. How he would begin to investigate the accident in which his father died. He didn't do it, he preferred to remain silent. Throughout his life he always looked out for the well-being of others, that will not change, but he also had the right to be happy, so what if he is only happy next to the three of them? And what does the opinion of others matter if they accepted this? Izuku didn't want to have any regrets. For the first time he wanted to be selfish and choose his happiness over that of others. Greedy. Selfish. A small sneer formed on his lips before he fell asleep. One undeniable truth was clear. Your grandson.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.